for Australia's longest distance motorcycle race, the Yamaha 750 production motorcycle race, which started at 9 o'clock this morning. And during the next 2.5 hours, we'll be bringing you highlights, taking you up to the final stage of the race live from Oran Park. It's a cloudy day out here, but the clouds are very high, and it should have a good effect on the race because it means more of attrition on the time. Not quite so bad. Well, the leading bike yesterday is Time Trials number 8, which is ridden today by Rob Phillips and Cole. It ran round in 122.6. And late in the afternoon, the Ducati Panda is ridden by Dick Peterson. More about other contenders. We take it to our commentator, Phil Hayes.
The second time the Yamaha 750 race has been run, first time last August, and a great success it was then, a thrilling race, a capacity field of 50 bikes running in 2 classes, 37 of them running in the big class, 601 to 750 cc's, all the Japanese manufacturers represented and one lone Ducati, and then the small class, 340 to 600 cc's, Ducati in among Suzuki and Kawasaki and Yamaha. So it should be a thrilling race because some of the team pairings are the best and the deepest right down through the field that we've seen in a long, long time. Only 2 seconds separated grid positions 3 to 28, the 26 top grid positions barring the top 2. And there was only 7/10 of a second separating the top 10 qualifiers. That's how close these bikes will be racing. And here are the people that in qualifying yesterday took the leading grid positions. You can see quite a mix of different brands, and that cheeky Ducati, the David among the Goliaths, 600 cc's, slotting itself into second grid position. Funnily the most expensive bike in the race, but one of the lightest and smallest capacity. It's going to be a rolling start for this event.
Pace car being driven by former Australian international Greg Hansford, who'll be joining us in the ABC commentary team today.
Other bikes to watch for, apart from those 10, further down in the field, bike number 15, the Hiscock brothers, David and Neville from New Zealand, top production racers, but funnily were down in qualifying yesterday to take only 13th grid position. Bike number 7, 21st grid position to 2 Australian champions and Bathurst Grand Prix winners, Andrew Johnson and Greg Critty riding a Honda. And bike number 2, even further down, Ron Bolden and Gary Coleman on a Yamaha dealer team entry. Look at that field as they go down to a slow corner on the back section of the circuit. Bolden and Coleman will be riding Yamaha 750 number 2, and they're starting from 24th grid position.
Winner of the late race last year was Len Willing and Rodney Brown. They're starting from 8th grid position on their Yamaha dealer team 750cc machine. This is the starting lap. The starter is ready to go, so if the bikes are well formed, we'll have a start in the Yamaha 750 race.
The track quite slippery and bumpy, but Peterson says on bike 39 it's not worrying him. There's Robbie Phillips, the Victorian on 8, who took pole position, a 122.6. Last year's time was a 121.8 for pole, so they're a bit off the times. All the riders agreed that the track is slippery. What a dramatic race it was last year as we look at bike 27. That's Suzuki Katana being ridden by Peter Barnwell and Andrew Daly. Peterson's plan is to cut and thrust for the lead in the opening laps, and hopefully when they get round to lapping traffic, he wants to try and make a break. So he is going to try and run that little 600 Ducati V-twin only against a whole pack of 4s up at the front of the field.
It's unlikely that the Peterson bike will win the drag race down the main straight. It will be underpowered at the top end of its range against the Phyllis Cole Suzuki. But you just watch him in the braking area as they come up now to the starter's flag. Phyllis and Cole take the lead, bike 8.
Rod Cox, who was leading it last year until the Engineering Suzuki seized, running in second place, and in third place Mick Damon, Rob Scollier, Tasmanian teaming. So Suzuki's at the moment prominent. And you can see in behind in fourth place Richard Schoolar, New Zealander, and Richard Scott also on a Yamaha.
Ducati slips back to 5th position.
Phyllis fell in the race last year.
and incidentally it is very slippery through those new S-bends. There is a lot of oil all over the track and the riders have to be very careful through there.
And they are being careful. You can see them just feeling the situation out at the moment. Quite cool, much more so than yesterday when, if those conditions had been repeated, they'd be starting to worry about tyre wear. White number plates indicating the big class machinery, 600 to 750, and the yellow background, the smaller class. Round to complete lap 1. And a very wide and slightly unplanned exit there, and that was a 1:25.6 second lap. So only a couple of seconds off to wind the bike up, and already the cut and thrust's on, turning it into a 10-lap sprint.
Damon Scollier bike now into the lead. 2.5 seconds back to Peterson on the Ducati.
And already a bike into the pits. Roger Hayes and Malcolm Campbell, two hard thrusting people who qualified 10th yesterday, in the pits already with bike number 3. And to Tasmanian Campbell there, the rider on the first session, a tremendous disappointment because both of them have the speed to win the race. 15 moving forward, as you can see, so that Peterson's now tailing Richard Schoolar and Richard Scott, two New Zealanders. There's Peterson, brother of David Peterson, who thrilled spectators and television viewers with his brilliant wet weather riding to share victory with Hiscock in last year's Castrol 6 Hour. Absolutely scintillating riding. And this, the older brother, Keith Peterson, can beat David. So he is an electrifying rider. And he's on a machine that he loves, 600 Ducati, that he runs in production racing in South Africa and has enormous success with.
In fact, he's never been beaten on his Ducati so far against 750cc machines. The production class in South Africa is for 750cc's, so this bike, which today is running in the 600cc class, runs in South Africa against the 750cc bikes, and as I say, since October last year, Peterson has not lost a race.
Running for a famous name in Australian motorsport, Mattich Racing. Frank Mattich, former Australian Gold Star champion, superb sports car developer, designer and driver, running a two-bike team in this race, the other one being number 38, Alan Blanco, and Tasmanian Scott Stevens.
Neville Hiscock on bike 15 comes up to challenge Mick Damon for the lead in the Yamaha 750. From 15th grid position, he's in second place already, and Neville Hiscock is flying. Damon looks behind him, and the two Suzukis tuck in nose to tail down the chute. Just watch Hiscock in the braking area. Out of the inside, Damon's got him covered, however. This little dice is starting to slow these two riders down a little bit as the rest of the field, led by the Michael Cole bike, starts to bunch up. Now he goes to the inside, can't do it there. The Hiscock brothers have spent $3,500 of their own money to mount this challenge at Oran Park today, which is unusual for a professional team to actually get involved in spending its own money in production bike racing these days, where quite a deal of sponsorship money exists. But as they said, they had nothing else to do this weekend, so they thought they'd like to go for a ride. Neville Hiscock on the bike at the moment, chasing Mick Damon. The decision whether Neville or David Hiscock would ride was only made by a flip of a coin about 5 minutes before the start of the race. They discussed it ad nauseum last night and couldn't decide who'd be the lead rider in a team that is incredibly talented. The two Hiscock brothers, one of many teams in this event today who really qualify as being #1 riders in both rider and co-rider position. Now the Phyllis Cole bike starts to sneak up behind them as again Hiscock challenges down the straight in the slipstream, and this time pulls out and takes the lead. The third leader so far in the Yamaha 750 race, and they're all in the first 3 positions now, and there's someone off at the fastest part of the circuit.
And it was running in 6th place as he went past to start that lap Paul Walkley and Glenn Middlemas. They qualified 7th. The rider looking for somewhere to lie down and rest. The Suzuki Katana, you can see obviously knocked about. The safety padding there would be helpful to both bike and rider. And that's a very quick section of circuit. It's depending on how you ride and how you attack it. It can be a top gear corner, at least a 4th gear corner. Peterson comes back to 4th gear for there. Another one down, and
that's Mick Damon, who was in 2nd place in the race. So the challenge really on Mick Damon. Down already led the race for about 10 minutes in the early opening stage, has been overtaken by David Hiscock, and the pace of the race just too great for Mick Damon.
This is right. The pace had sped up from the 23.5 to 23.3 that Damon was doing to the previous lap of Hiscock, 23.07. Now at 22.9, the charging New Zealander. And Damon just trying too hard to run at the front. And so 2 crashes, 2 teams out, and the race been running for just 13 minutes. A bad fall there. 32 is down. Gordon Lonsdale and Terry Hewen, and 46 from the small class, Chris Dixon, Steve Ashkenazi, who broke his pelvis here in the race last year. Again, you can see the safety crash padding there that's of some assistance. This is the exit from the slow corner down the bottom leading up to the bridge. And you can see there Gordon Lonsdale, the lead rider, a C grader, on number 32, the Suzuki 750.
Lonsdale, a Lance Corporal in the Army, a big man, over 6 feet tall, and very fit indeed. He'll need his fitness at this stage.
Peterson on 39 had fallen back as far as 8th place from his 2nd qualifying grid position, but now has worked his way forward to 4th. But have a look at the telltale signs from the twin exhausts of the V-twin 600cc Ducati. 58 brake horsepower, a real little sportster. $4,000 worth of motorcycle there. And there it goes again. Whenever he backs off, he's getting a build-up of oil. As you can see, as he comes onto the throttle again, he burns it clean.
Managed team mechanic Wayne Anderson has spent a very long week working on the team's 2 bikes, and his problems were heightened by the fact that the team's Honda went down the road in a fairly bad way 2 days ago, breaking the leg of Vince Sharp, one of the riders, who's at the moment in the Mater Hospital in Sydney. And I think possibly the strain of running 3 bikes, 2 of them arriving from Italy only a week ago, is already starting to tell on the managed team.
In 4th place behind the Hiscock pairing on 15 in 1st place. 2nd place, Rob Phillis, Mick Cole, another Suzuki number 8. 3rd place, number 10, Richard Schoolar and Richard Scott. Yamaha, number 10. And behind Peterson is number 4, Rod Cox, Neil Chivas on another Suzuki. So Suzuki's dominant at this stage. And you can see there Peterson now has fallen behind. Sorry, he's still behind in 4th place, yes, behind Schoolar and Scott on 10. Alan, what seems to be the matter?
Not sure at the moment. It didn't run right sort of virtually from the word go from this morning, so I don't know what happened sort of last night, but it was just sort of going about 10,000 revs and cutting out, and eventually cut out to 1 cylinder. So I persisted out there hoping it'd clear itself or something, but it hasn't, and it just got worse. So the boys are trying to get it all organised for us, but a bit of a setback. But this is my track, so I don't know.
Are you going to change riders now? You're hoping to improve situation?
Well, Scott and I only got on the bike very late Thursday afternoon, so we've probably done, that's the longest session I've done, probably, 20 minutes or something. So basically, so I've had a bit of practice on the bike, get Scott on the bike early in some traffic, get him used to it too, and hopefully at the end of the race we can get going.
Hiscock looks behind him as he comes out of Yamaha corner, up over the dog leg. But the bike's so evenly matched as Hiscock gets the rear end really out of whack then, and lets Phyllis come up on the inside of him. And a bit of a concerned look there, I'd say, from Neville Hiscock as he looks down at the rear wheel to see just what went wrong.
He's also almost asking Rob Phyllis, "You're trying to upset me," and Rob saying, no, I'm not doing anything, I'm just running my pace. But that says, his pace at the moment says that he wants the lead. But he's certainly not trying to upset him or to be rude and nasty.
Lap 20, 268 laps remaining, and I don't think Keith Peterson is going to see the distance. The smoke that was coming out of the exhaust pipe has now transferred itself to the engine, and Peterson is in a lot of trouble. Dropping back in fourth position from bike 10, Richard Schooler and Richard Scott. I'd say we'll see him heading for the pits even on this lap, and here he goes. What a disappointment for the New Zealand rider, who showed such great promise in this race.
29.5 minutes of the race run, of a race that will run some 6 3/4 hours, 6 hours 50, something like that. And here, Mattich team, Chris Mattich, the son of Frank, Pirelli and AGV importers. Rick Walden, his co-rider, who used to ride a Yamaha 750, went to Europe, and in recent times has been concentrating a lot on getting a helicopter license.
I think we got a oil leak somewhere. I think it's from the breather pipe. But the motor's also gone off. I've lost about 1,000 RPM down the straight, which is making it a bit difficult because I'm slower than the 750s already. So I'm just trying that a bit harder around the back. We'll just see now where the oil's coming from and hope to continue from there, you know.
How was the bike going early in the race?
I wasn't going very hard, actually. I just wanted to settle down and see what everybody else was doing, and then we were hoping to make a charge later on in the race.
Lead riders are really having to work now as they thread their way through traffic. Watching here bike numbers 6 and 1, respectively the leading Honda and the best placed Yamaha, having a great old dice. Glenn Taylor's on the Honda, which he's sharing with Graham Muir, and it's a Honda or a Team Honda entry. And harrying him is last year's winner, lanky Len Willing, on bike number 1, who won the race with Rodney Brown, the Queenslander. And there you can see how serious he is about trying to get to the lead. Willing was back in 9th place in the opening laps and has moved forward to 5th place. Glenn Taylor had fallen back as far as 11th and is now in 4th. So each have enormously improved their positions, and as I say, behind the Suzukis that are dominating the race at the moment, there's the lead Honda. He's running 4th, being chased by the XJ 750 Yamaha, virtually the same model that won the race last year. Suzuki Katana, and this is their weakness. The alternator cover there on the left-hand side, actually either side can be grounded, and you can see there the gearbox, and they're having to disconnect the electrics, and you can see there in the foreground the alternator side, and this has been their shortcoming. If the riders in any way go too tight on a corner to a ripple strip or heel it over too hard, that's the vulnerable part, and it only takes 3 or 4 fairly light jabs and they're through it and they're in real trouble. And remember that the lead bikes are Suzuki Katanas at the moment.
Bike 8 takes the lead from bike 15. So Rob Phyllis goes back to the lead that he held very early in the race, and the Hiscocks drop back into 2nd position. The passing manoeuvre occurred in traffic. It can happen just that easily.
A wisp of smoke there from Phyllis's bike too, from one pipe, as he went up to the bridge where he really is loading the bike and gunning it hard. He ran it out to 3rd gear. He's in 3rd gear all the way through here, feathers, then cracks it open.
Oh, there goes Glenn Taylor off the track. Here we see it. Leading here was bike 6, Glenn Taylor, and he simply just goes wide on that cement, goes through the dirt, and look at him motocrossing across the infield of Oran Park as bike 4, the Rod Cox Neil Chivas Suzuki, goes through.
The smaller class is for bikes 340 cc's to 600. Got quite a range of machines. Water-cooled Yamaha twin-cylinder 2-strokes, LCs as they're called, 350s. So they're right down the bottom end of the race in engine size and also in price. And then bikes from most of the Japanese manufacturers. Yamaha have also got their 554 cylinder. Honda's not there, nor is Suzuki, but Kawasaki's there and Ducati. And here's the race situation with 38 laps completed by several of the lead bikes. That's 100 kilometres covered of a 750 kilometre race for 750cc machines, maximum engine size. And the dice has been on between 8 and 15 for the lead. Resolved at the moment with 54 minutes of the race run, with Rob Phillis on 8 leading from 15 David Hiscock. Then we come through here to the smaller class. Keep your eyes on 38-39 with the Matic team bikes. There's the class leader 40, Perro, that we were just looking at, and Williams. And then they run in order, actually, 41, 42, 49 is in there too. You can see 36 laps completed. 43 and 48 follow.
That's bike 9 into the pits. He's in 3rd position. That's the Paul Lewis bike, and he's shaking his head very, very disappointed. In fact, Lewis not on the bike. That's Chris Oldfield riding the machine.
Looks like we've done another big end. That's our 3rd one.
Big drama here for bike 3, Malcolm Campbell and Roger Hayes, that's been into the pits on numerous occasions, and I would say the spirit of that team now would be at about its lowest ebb. It spilt some fuel too as it went down. And Malcolm Campbell, who broke a leg at Bathurst last year, there you can see the potential danger to following bikes.
That's cement being placed on the track to dry up the fuel and oil that has been spilt. With only 1 hour 6 minutes of the Yamaha 750 race done, the Len Willing Yamaha XJ 750, winner of the event last year, looks like he's heading for the pits. He's right leg cocked out there, and yes, he is coming to the pits now. Now that's very early. That's only 45 laps done, and he's looking for a scheduled fuel stop already, opening the tank of the bike. The bike's tank only takes 19 litres. That's the smallest tank capacity of any of the lead competitors. Rodney Brown there standing at the side ready to move in. The fuel being dumped right now, probably from a frozen fuel tank, to get an extra litre into the tank. But that's very, very early for a fuel stop. He should have been looking for well in excess of 50 laps, and he's only got 45 out of it. Bike started and they're away in less than 20 seconds. That's very good indeed. But still, if they've had to take a stop right now, that means that they're looking for an extra stop in the race, and that's 20 seconds extra that they can't afford against the opposition.
3rd place when they pitted, will still be holding a very respectable place. They'll be in the top 10, I would say, even after that pit stop. Well, that got them into right across. Occupying 5th and 6th place at the moment, numbers 4, Rod Cox, sharing his bike later in the race with Neil Chivas, a Suzuki Katana, and 25 presently being ridden by Max Thompson and to be shared with John Behrens. They came 7th in the race last year, and Dennis Neal you're a production race expert, you rather like production-based bikes. What's the problems of these bikes at this stage with the first pit stop coming up within perhaps a quarter of an hour or so?
Right, I think what would be going through the minds of Rodney, I was just talking to him this morning before the race, and he didn't want to dice up there with the leaders. He thought he'd sit back in about 4th or 5th spot, try and keep in touch with them, and make sure he was there at the end, and that looks like obviously what he's doing. Max Thompson, who's on bike 25 there just behind him, I'm very surprised he's actually keeping up and giving him a bit of a hurry up there. Just slipped by.
A lot of hurry up, because he's just come through to 5th place. Put Cox, who's happy to take that,
right,
back to 6th.
Greg Pretty's just moved right up behind him too, so I suspect Rodney might have some sort of a problem with his bike. Okay. Wouldn't think that he'd be that far back.
Andrew Johnson, Greg Pretty sharing bike number 7. They're lying in 7th place. Dennis, how do you see the race between the various marks? Suzuki doing the front running at the moment. Yamaha were in there until that early pit stop of Len Willing. Then you've got Honda and Kawasaki fairly even.
Yes, the Honda and Kawasaki's are pretty much the same. The Suzukis have definitely got the advantage, I think, at this circuit, with their only problem being the alternator, which is very thin. 3 or 4 scrapes on that, which is pretty easy to do when you're coming up to lap traffic. You can wear through it.
When you get offline, get onto bumps or whatever.
When you've got to tuck it in a bit tighter to get under someone, or they move in front of you, you have to lean a little bit harder and it might just hit. And 3 or 4 hits, as I said, they start weeping oil out, and then it's pretty dangerous.
You're very close to the Honda team, obviously. How's the radio working on bike number 7 there, who's going through on Rod Cox too?
Yeah,
are they happy with the effect both ways?
Yes, they're very, very happy. This is the first time they've run it in this race, and I actually tested it the other day with them, and it's extremely clear. You can hear it from right over the other side of the circuit. They don't talk to them all that often, but it's just critical times, giving distances between the riders behind and in front of him. And they do a fair bit of talking, obviously, when they're coming close to their pit stop.
Dennis, what about, there's been a number of falls, and obviously they tend to drop petrol and perhaps oil too when they do fall. Track conditions weren't good when the race started, were they?
No, Oran Park seems to be deteriorating, unfortunately. They ran some trucks out here a few weeks ago for some press people, and they tore the track terribly up around through the Esses, and you'll notice that just this section here, they've replaced it with concrete, which doesn't adhere for very good, well, it isn't very good adhesion with the tyres, and most of the riders are trying to actually go offline but steer clear of the concrete through there.
The Paul Lewis, Chris Oldfield Kawasaki already out. Now problems for Lee Roebuck in 8th position on your Kawasaki. What's happened, Lee?
I suspected big end failure.
Same problem as the other bike. The Kawasaki's got problems?
Well, I only heard of one other Kawasaki yesterday, but I haven't seen the rest of them. I don't know what's happened to them.
Race leader, 8 seconds in front, but going to the pits is Rob Phillis. He's 8 seconds in front of the Hiscock brothers on 15. They're 22 seconds in front of bike number 6, Glenn Taylor, Graham Muir.
There's oil over there in that bottom corner where Wally fell off.
Robbie Phillips. 25 seconds to stop. How's the bike going?
Oh, really good. Really good.
No problems with the machine at all?
No problems. I ran off over there. I wasn't concentrating. I managed to get back on the track safely. I don't know how, but... I reckon if I'd have fallen off, everyone at home wouldn't have forgiven me.
You were giving the Hiscock brothers a really hard time there for a while.
Well, it'd be nice to get a nice lead and make it easier for Mick. So far it hasn't been real hard, but just as long as we can keep it up.
You know you forced the pace under the pole position winning time from yesterday. You're down to a 22.4.
I didn't know that.
Do you think perhaps you're forcing the pace too hard at this early stage?
Oh, well, it felt all right then. Probably slow down towards the end of the day. But it's okay at the moment, and I just hope everything goes well.
Best of luck, Rob Phillips.
Thanks a lot.
Dennis is a former teammate of Mick Cole, who's ridden Hondas almost throughout his career. He's happy with the change to Suzuki, finding the bike acceptable.
I actually tipped them all week to win this, so
I hope I don't put the hex on them, but I think you'll find they'll be there at the end of the day.
The Len Willing Yamaha, which of course pitted just at the 1 hour mark, dropped to 11th place and has worked its way back to 9th now. The race leader in the pits after 1 hour and 23 minutes of riding. Older brother Neville handing over to taller brother David. But the younger of the two brothers, and out in a very smart stop indeed.
Okay. Lightning stop for the Hiscock team, less than 20 seconds by a long way. Nev, you must be feeling happy.
Reasonably happy, yes.
They're saying there's a lot of oil out there. Is it hard to ride?
Yes, it is a bit hard. You just got to just keep away from the oil, but sometimes you can't see where it is.
What's your advice to David as you went out?
I just told him where the tricky bits of oil were, so he could miss them on the first slope. If he didn't know where they were, it could easily come down.
The pace of the race has been incredibly hard. In fact, Rob Phillis got under pole position time yesterday when he started to move away from you. Were you prepared to chase?
As a matter of fact, I wasn't in a frame of mind to chase them too hard. You know, like I think I would have tried a bit harder if I could, but in another way, it's not good to try too hard at the start of the race.
Phillis was giving you a lot of hard time there for a while. Were you feeling the pressure?
No, not really, actually. I didn't know he was so close behind me.
With hair smiling.
Yeah, well. Lap 69 of the Yamaha 750 race, and dicing for the lead. The Dave Hiscock Suzuki being followed very closely now by Michael Cole on bike 8 there, as you see them lapping bike 37, Glenn Fenton, on one of the remaining Kawasaki's in the event. And this is turning into something of a real race of tactics, Dennis Neal.
Sure is, because both riders you see here are the second riders in the team. The leading riders for each team roughly held about an equal position, and I think this is going to be where the race will be won or lost, and who can make the gap out of the secondary riders.
Well, earlier in the race, in exactly the same position, we watched Rob Phillis putting a lot of heavy pressure on Neville Hiscock, and now Phillis's co-rider is doing exactly the same thing to Dave Hiscock. What would Hiscock's riding tactics be in a situation like this?
He'd be trying to ride as smooth as possible, not make any mistakes. He'd obviously be aware that Mick's right behind him, and he'd worked out before the race that basically he was going to be out of the two teams. They're riding identical bikes and they're using the identical brand of tyres, so it's really all up to the guy sitting on board the bike. It's their lap time.
Phillis, of course, on bike 8 is regarded as a more aggressive rider than Michael Cole, who's now on the machine, his co-rider. Do you think Cole will try those sort of ducking and weaving passing tactics that Phillis undertook?
I think he'll do a bit of that to obviously keep Dave in front of him really honest, but it's a surprise a few weeks ago, Mick actually was employed by the team as a good backup rider. He actually beat Robbie in a race down at Mount Gambier, so that sort of put a bit of a hornet into the nest.
Which in fact has made Rob Phillis super competitive, because he now has pressure on him from within his own team as a lap rider gets in the way there, and that's just how aggressive Michael Cole is becoming, because he didn't even think to hesitate to hang about. He just dove underneath the other rider.
I think now that Mick has switched to the Suzuki camp, he's really got something to prove, not only to himself but to the people, the Honda people that formerly employed him. So he'll be trying that little bit extra harder just to prove to everyone that he's lost absolutely nothing.
What do you think he's trying to prove to Honda? Are you saying that perhaps they thought he'd lost his competitive edge?
I think that was the general consensus of opinion, yeah.
Well, certainly not showing up in today's race.
No, I don't think he has at all. I think Mick's a very sensible rider. He only really tries when he needs to, and might have been a little complacent at a couple of the rides last year, but he's got the track record to prove that he's really, really good.
Watching the gear changes as we come down the straight there, it seems to me that Hiscock is revving the bike just a little bit harder. He's taking his change just a little later.
Right, he might be hassled a little bit. Mick's obviously in the better position here. He's not having to lead the race, and he hasn't got as many things to think about. He can just sit behind Dave and keep pushing him, and he's the one that'll be unnerving him.
Lap times for the last 4 laps are 24.6, then dropped more than this, about a second, to a 25.67, back to a 25.15, and now a 24.68. So through traffic, they're sustaining about 113.5 kilometres an hour average speed. And Mick Cole, Dennis Neal, would be revelling in the pressure that he's putting on Dave Hiscock, because he just has the feeling that, of course, he might force him into error, and with him having to watch all the time behind him, he's making him work his bike a bit harder, while Mick can just watch and sit with him.
Exactly how they planned it. I was actually out to dinner with the McCain team last night, and they were discussing their tactics, and they said if the Hiscock brothers do get in front, we'll just sit behind them and push them and push them and push them, hope that they'll make a little error.
Glenn Taylor's already run off circuit once when being pressured before their pit stop. Here he is again being pressured, this time by Richard Scott on an XJ750 Yamaha. They're running 5th and 6th place, and one of several dices that are developing now, with 1 3/4 hours running completed, 73 laps, and there are 9 bikes on the same lap. So in other words, there are 3 behind number 10 there that are on the same lap, 73 completed. Incidentally, coming into interesting calculations is the leader of the small class. He is lying 10th outright and has been leading the class consistently, Ian Perot, on bike number 40, Yamaha. So it's still an interesting competition, not only between lead riders and relief riders, but also between marks, all of them in there punching in both classes, and none with a clearly obvious upper hand, except that, of course, Suzuki are running well in 1st and 2nd place. But then outright you've got Yamaha, Honda lurking not very far behind, and problems to some of the Kawasaki's. Dennis Neal, is there any connecting factor between the Kawasaki's that have had engine trouble?
Yes, we've, I won't mention brands, but actually 3 of the Kawasaki's have now, I think 4 have actually blown up. They've all done their big end bearings in the crankshaft. They have a plain bearing crank, the 750, unlike the Unlimited Kawasaki's have a roller bearing bottom end, which never gives trouble. And apparently with a plain bearing bottom end, if you use a particular brand of oil, which all 4 bikes have been using, they seem to be blowing up and doing the bearing.
And here in the 600cc class, 340 to 600cc, 41 has been running 2nd for a long, long time in that class. Bernie Summers and John Wood. It's Bernie Summers, the tough, nuggety little advertising manager for Revs magazine, who tries to make an annual visit to Daytona too. Recently promoted to A grade, and here are the 3 lead bikes in that class. Look at them, at hammer and tongs, so that 41 is Yamaha, 40 is Kawasaki, and 42 is Ducati Pantar. Dennis Neal, they'd be a much easier bike to ride around the circuit than even the 750s, and certainly than an 1100 with all the power that it's got.
Well, they're easier from the point of view of they haven't got as much power, but the hard point in riding is you have to really keep them wound up. If you make it at all a smaller mistake, if you get a little bit offline or leave your braking a bit too late, you haven't got the power to be able to correct the mistake that you've made. It takes you a couple of laps to wind yourself back up to a rhythm again.
So in fact, they have to forecast even what's ahead even more so than the bigger bike riders.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Perot goes back to the lead, is balked by a slower rider and is again overtaken by Bernie Summers. And on the inside by 42, coming down there.
How reluctant they are to back off is being shown by the intensity of this dice. Wonderful racing and about to envelop numbers 47, Alan Simpson. He has Morgan Farragen riding with him, a Norwegian visitor to the country.
That's just what traffic can do, though, Dennis Neal. Just how significant is it when you get a slower bike right in the middle of a dice like that?
Well, those guys would really be cursing under their breath because they're 3 leading places in their class, and they'll sort of be riding 10 tenths, as you can see. They'd really curse when they get someone slower on a bigger bike, especially in front of them. They can get all over the back of them around the circuit. Down the straight, the 750s usually will go by again. They've got to do it all over again.
Mick Cole has found his way through and will be very pleased, I imagine, Dennis Neal, to have done that.
Mick must be feeling very confident because, as I said, their plan was to sit behind and force them into error, but they said if they felt as though they could go faster comfortably, they'd do it. So Mick must have really got his rhythm up now, and he should pull away.
A great long-distance rider, Dennis. He's had experience here and a lot of success, but also in Japan too, and done very well. Won the Suzuka 8R.
Right, he's won pretty well all the major races in Australia on the superbike.
And Hiscock's bike moving there as he came out of the corner.
Right. They're both using the same brand of tyres, so it's interesting that Hiscock's bike is sliding a bit. They vary the air pressures according to their own riding style. But Mick's bike looks very stable at this stage, and Dave's just sliding around a bit in the back.
We wouldn't want you to endorse the brand of tyres that you're involved with, Dennis, but they are both on Dunlop. And of course, this is a tyre war between Pirelli, that's been so dominant in production racing, and also Metzeler.
Right, all 3 brands, Pirelli, Dunlop and Metzeler, seem represented very well at all these major races. It's interesting to note, I've got some few details here actually for qualifying, that the fastest 20 bikes in practice yesterday, 7 of the bikes were using Dunlop front and rear, 6 were using Pirelli, so they're pretty close, those 2 brands. There's only 2 on Metzeler.
The Metzelers potentially have a problem, don't they, with wear, particularly today's hot.
In this particular race, being 7 hours duration, their tyre is very, very grippy. The soft compound, the sport compound, which is most of the bikes that started on today. Lenny Willing used one of those on the back of his bike last year, which was in August and quite a lot cooler, and the tyre was absolutely bald at the end. So it's going to be interesting to note today just how the Metzelers are looking towards it.
And what about tyre wear on Dunlops and Pirellis? Get through all right under today's conditions?
Yes, no problems at all. With the Dunlops, there's 2 different compounds. They have a race compound and a street compound. And the teams here, Mick Cole and Robbie Phillips, they're both, the Hiscock brothers, are both running the harder compound tyres, so there shouldn't be any problems there.
Yet another rider down in this race of incredible attrition, people falling off all over the place, and that's a bad one, down on the fastest section of the course. It's bike 20, it's Manny Blanco with Mick Feehan on the Suzuki.
Travelling marshal quick to join the corner marshals in, as you can see, returning the crash padding to the fence to make it safe for other riders, getting the bike off the track and appropriately attending to the riders. So he's having foot peg trouble apparently.
.98 laps down, and there is the race for 3rd place. Diving underneath bike 1, Rodney Brown is bike 4. That's the Rod Cox Neil Chivas Suzuki, and he takes over 3rd position. Down the main straight, That's Suzuki leads Yamaha. The Yamaha, of course, which won last year's Yamaha 750 race, relegated to 4th position. And it just shows that the Suzukis do have the legs in power on the Yamahas, and it's going to be longevity and durability which will hand the Yamaha the race if anything occurs to the Suzukis.
For the leading bike, number 8, that's 262 kilometres, so up around 1/3 race distance, and leading from bike number 15 there with 100 completed also. 3rd place bike 4, that's the Rod Cox, Neil Chivas Suzuki, so you've got Suzuki's 1, 2, 3.
And dropping back to 5th position now is the Len Willing Rod Brown Yamaha, having been overtaken by this bike, Glenn Taylor and Graham Muir, the Honda. So we have to start asking the question, is there a problem with the leading Yamaha in the event, their bike 1, because in less than 4 or 5 laps, he's dropped back 2 positions. In the pits, the second pit stop for the Yamaha team, they were having problems. They were running out of fuel. Glenn Willing is now back on the machine. It's taken about 25 seconds for that pit stop, a long one for the Yamaha team.
It's surprising because they got only 1 hour out of their first stop and they got 1 hour 25 out of the second, so the first one must have been this time. Or there's an enormous difference between the fuel consumption of one rider and the other, and I don't see that it could be that different.
Well, certainly the other team bike got also to the 1 hour 25 minute mark before it took its pit stop. So whatever happened the first time round, maybe you could put it down to simply nerves. With us in the commentary position at the moment is Australian international rider Greg Hansford. Greg, welcome, and what would you think may have been the problem on that first pit stop?
I'm not sure, John. When I was watching Lenny when he was out there the first time, he indicated that he was running out of fuel about 6 or 7 laps before he was due to come in, and Warren wasn't sure, so they got ready and everything seemed all right, so they kept going for a while, but he still didn't get to the 50-odd laps that I think that he was supposed to do.
Which could in fact cause the team to have an additional pit stop in the race, which would be disastrous for them.
Well, they've been doing quick pit stops, but if you've got someone within the same lap as you and you've got to do an extra one, well, then you're in big trouble. But, you know, the fuel might be frothing in the tank and not getting through the lines properly. Many things that can be wrong with it.
Greg, the other drama which this bike faces is it's running a very soft rear Metzeler tyre, which will probably have to take a change sometime during the race. What sort of time should the team be looking at to change the tyre?
Well, depending on how they've set up the back end of the bike itself, a good time would be well under a minute to do it. But I was going to say the other reason why a few of these guys might be falling off is that the sun's been out for a while now, and there is a bit of a breeze, which is keeping everybody fairly cool. But the track surface is heating up, and we could be having some detrimental effect to the rear tyres.
The bike streamed through the S's, and yet another fall, bike 36, that's Chris Mitchell. Bork's bike 27, Peter Barnwell on the Suzuki, and he's down. Let's see it again. You see Mitchell come through. He miscues the corner, gets the bike all sideways, and that's enough to send Peter Barnwell looking for some way to go down, but he high sides it rather than putting it down the right way and flings himself to the infield. Fortunately on a fairly slow corner. And there's the aftermath. Yet more oil and slippery material for the other remaining riders in the Yamaha 750 race to avoid.
race leader coming in with a 15-second lead now to make his second pit stop. This is Mick Cole, who's done such a good job handing over to the lead rider, Rob Phillis. But Cole has pulled out that handy lead on Hiscock, who goes through now, and so he's in the lead. And another 10, 15 seconds at least from when Hiscock went by, but he's due for a stop too shortly. But that's a bad stop. And the hose crinkle, cutting the time.
It's taken just on 30 seconds. That is a bad stop for the Honda team. Oh, for the Suzuki team, rather.
So an advantage of 15 seconds when he came in has probably been down 10 to 15 seconds on what the stop should have been, so that when Hiscock does his stop fairly shortly, hands back to the older brother Neville, who's a bit quicker than he, then it could be that they'll be very close together. Bike 8 now still holding third place though, only overtaken by two bikes, the second of them Rod Cox, Neil Chivas, in another of the Suzuki's number 4. And let's hear from Mick Cole, the man who's been in the saddle for the last 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Well, leading in the race at the moment is Rob Phillis and Mick Cole on bike number 8. Mick, you've just changed over. How's the bike going?
Bike's not missing a beat, but that we're conserving tyres the whole lot. But there is a problem with the Suzukis that the alternator cover, it doesn't take much for to touch them on the ground, and you can wear a hole in them really easily. And we've just been informed that it's been touched on the ground a couple of times, so we might have a bit of a hassle later on.
Some 27 seconds in the lead from Rob Phillis comes the leader of the Yamaha 750cc race. The Hiscock brothers into the pits for their second scheduled stop. Dave Hiscock on the bike, the watch on, fuel being dumped in now into a 22-litre tank. 10 seconds gone. Dave checking the rear of the bike, making sure that the tyres are okay. Neville straddling the machine now. He'll be given a fuel cock off. Oh! Phillis has gone through, the bike wouldn't start. 27 seconds in the pit, so a slow stop again for the Hiscock brothers, second time around. They would have been out in only 20 had there not been that little stall towards the end.
I'm just going to...
And there's the leader now. Rob Phillis back in the lead. His poor pit stop having been made up for by the poor pit stop of the second place bike of Neville and Dave Hiscock. Neville Hiscock now on the machine again.
Well, it's going fine. It's fairly windy out there. My Jibs helmet is very comfortable in the wind and it's making riding a lot easier than it would normally. But and the bike's going fine and everything's looking good.
We've just been speaking to the leader, Mick Cole, and he said they've got a little bit of trouble with their alternator cover. How's yours?
No, ours is just fine. No problem at all.
And how are your tyres?
Tyres are very good. The Dunlops are really holding on well.
And how's the track for you?
I'm not all that happy with the track. It's not in very good condition at the moment. Mainly there's a lot of bumps on it. But Katanas are handling the bumps really well, and I think we've got an advantage here over some of the other makes.
And what's your race plan from here on in?
We'll be keeping an eye on the other guys, and just trying to go as fast as we can all the time, and keeping an eye on the other guys all the same.
Okay, Dave, good luck. Thank you.
Second pit stop for bike 40, the leading bike by 2 laps in the 600cc class. Ian Perrow and Glenn Williams. Glenn Williams, the New Zealand rider, now out on the machine again. And with 2 laps lead, they've only just got to coast around for the remaining 140 laps of the Yamaha 750. Williams, 26-year-old from Auckland in New Zealand, usually rides with Vince Sharp, who of course broke a leg in practice earlier this week. Williams is a 3 handicap golfer.
Well, leading in the 340 to 600cc class is bike 40. Ian Perrow just changed riders. How's the bike, Ian?
Good, excellent. Everything's going real good.
How pleased are you with your performance? You're only really a lap behind the outright leader.
Are we? I didn't know. Oh, I'm pleased. Wrapped.
Did you feel that you'd be that close to the leader at this stage of the race?
Well, we thought we had a good show in the top 10. I don't know if we are in the top 10, but I think we'll get there in the end. Everything's going all right. Fuel stops are good. Everything's working out real good. The bike's running beautiful.
Well, running third at the moment on bike 7, Andrew Johnson and Greg Pretty. How do you see the race from here on in, Andrew?
Oh, we're only just into the race. We've still got a lot of hours to go. I just hope that me and Greg keep the bike upright, nothing happens to it. The track's in bad condition. Over the back there's oil everywhere. The slower riders are causing quite a problem, but with a bit of luck we might be able to finish in the top 5.
Well, some of the war of attrition that we've seen already today, how do you feel it's going to affect you with respect to the tyres?
With the tyres going off? Well, I don't think the tyres are going off on ours. We're running Dunlops. I see that Pirellis are having a bit of trouble, but at this stage our tyres are looking quite good.
And are you confident that you and Greg can really get there right up towards the first place?
Well, we're both the calibre riders what's needed to do that, but a lot of luck's needed in this sort of race. Endurance racing is very unpredictable. Something could happen the last lap. I would not like to say.
Getting on the board we're showing.
The race leader at this stage is the Suzuki number 8 of Victorians Rob Phillis and Mick Cole, leading the similar bike, number 15 of the New Zealand brothers, David Hiscock and Neville Hiscock. Half race distance, 375 kilometres, 144 laps covered in 3 hours and 25 minutes of riding on what is now developing to be a very sunny and windy day at Oran Park. Not a strong wind, but a breezy wind, keeping people cool. And here's the race leader, as you can see, still keen, still intense, still concentrating hard. Rob Phillis, the young Albury rider, who's been having such a great year last year and now into this with Mick Hone motorcycles, and really enjoying having good machinery at his command, well prepared, good pit crew work to back him up.
Well, just about to see a wheel change to Les Willing's bike. Warren, the team manager, how long do you expect it to take?
Well, if everything goes smoothly, we're looking at about 42 seconds, 43 seconds.
And what's the strategy behind the wheel change?
Oh, it's just the tyre preference for the riders. The tyre that they choose to use, which is the one they won on last year, in the hot weather is getting a bit slippery. So to have a fresh tyre for the last part of the race, if they need to go a bit quicker, then they've got the tyre there if they need it.
Well, the bike's moved up into 4th position now. Are you feeling fairly confident about catching the leaders?
I think it's more a matter of not making any mistakes and doing what we can do, and it's up to them to maintain the lead they've got. They're doing it well at the moment, but it's a hard race. There's still a long way to go.
Warren Willing.
Len Willing lying 4th in the race at the moment, coming into the pits for what will be the most critical and difficult stop of the race, a tyre change. Let's watch it. That part of it's worked brilliantly.
10 seconds gone. 2 men working on the rear of the machine.
A shaft drive at the rear, so not the complication of a chain to get around, fewer nuts and bolts.
Old wheel out in 25 seconds.
Look at the lack of panic and the lack of hurry. Proceed slowly. Axle bolt in. There'll be a clincher bolt now and a nut to go on the end. Brake drum being secured and positioned.
Over Warren Willing's target time, 45 seconds gone. He wanted to do it in 42.
Top race driver and former Kawasaki team rider Murray Sale working at the back. There goes the clincher bolt on the right-hand side.
1 minute down. Okay.
And the front drops down and they're away, and nearly drop it in the pit area.
1 minute, 11 seconds the pit stop.
That's a pretty good exercise. 30 seconds longer than they'd planned, but a pretty well thought out strategy.
Lost less than a lap to change the tyre. They will now be 1 lap down on the leader, Rob Phillips.
And they've dropped, in fact, only 1 race position, so that the race order remains Rob Phillips and Mick Cole leading on 8 from the Hiscock brothers, Neville and David, on 15. 4 is in 3rd place, Rod Cox, Neil Chivas, so it's all Suzuki's there. Then the 2 Hondas of Glenn Taylor, Graham Muir, Andrew Johnson, Greg Pretty, and then the Yamaha number 1, Rodney Brown and Len Willing.
"19 seconds in the lead from the Hiscock brothers Suzuki, and Rob Phillips comes in for his 3rd scheduled stop to hand over to Michael Cole, waiting there in the pits. Fuel being dumped into the bike.
Christ.
Phillips checks out the tyre condition and worries not too much about it, preferring to talk to Cole about the track conditions. 15 seconds, less than 15 seconds, 14.6 seconds the stop. Flashing stop from the Suzuki of Michael Cole back onto the track, but even in that stop he's handed the lead back to Neville Hiscock, who is yet to take his 3rd stop. There's Hiscock there on bike 15, going down into the hairpin on the Grand Prix section of the Oran Park track. Hiscock due to take his pit stop in the next 10 minutes or so, which will reverse the positions again, but with more than half of the race now covered, it's a cracking pace that these motorcycles are setting, and they are so close, it can be anybody's race. Only 1 minute 15 seconds separates the top 5 bikes in the field, and the 5th bike in the field is, of course, the Greg Pretty Andrew Johnson bike, the Honda, which has unlapped itself on these leaders. Greg Pretty going for a broke at this stage on his Honda. But in the pits, it's Rob Phillips.
Well, Rob Phillips, the race leader on bike number 8, just came in and changed over riders with Mick Cole. How's the bike now, Rob?
Oh, the bike's going really well. No problem so far. It's just me. I think I'm the biggest problem. I can't handle this heat.
Well, Len Willings just changed a back tyre. How are your tyres?
Oh, no worries. We do another 8 hours.
Well, Mick was telling us earlier about the alternator cover. You were having some problems. How are they going now?
Well, I touched it 3 times in the first stint. I haven't touched it since, so as long as Mick can keep it off the ground, I think we'll be okay.
And you're feeling pretty happy towards a victory?
Oh, not yet. Nah, I'll see what happens after the next stint.
Thanks very much, Rob.
In 10th position outright, the only lady rider in the event, Jenny Coates, on the Kawasaki 750 bike 30. Jenny was left without a ride for this race, although she's probably Australia's most experienced female competitor. She advertised in Revs, one of the motorcycle magazines, and a New Zealand rider, Ron Carrick, out here to pursue his motorcycle career, answered the advertisement. They pooled their resources, less than $500, and they're out there today teaching the leaders how to go about their racing. They're, as I say, in 10th position, catching up through the field, and where consistency counts, that's where Jenny's doing the job right now. Jenny, a nursing sister from Sydney, working at Westmead Hospital at the moment. And Ron Carrick, a motorcycle mechanic. But indeed, Jenny's had her moments, and here we'll have a look at a replay of an incident just a moment ago when she miscued the corner just ever so slightly. And watch her leg there. That's how close she came to pulling off. It was a knees and thigh only that kept her on the machine. Five seconds in the lead only from the Rod Cox Suzuki, and Neville Hiscock brings his Suzuki into the pits. He'll lose the lead in this pit stop. This is the 3rd scheduled stop for the Hiscock brothers, and David Hiscock, the younger but taller brother, will take over.
Coming in right behind them into the pits is the 2nd placed bike. So in other words, that's one they haven't been overtaken by, Rod Cox and Neil Chivas. So they may well drop only 1 placing, that being to Rob Phillips, Mick Cole.
17.5 seconds to stop, but they've got problems right now. That'll take it over the 20-second mark. But whatever the information was that Neville wanted to give David, it was obviously worth holding him up. And there's bike 8, the new leader, and the leader for so long in the Yamaha 750 race. Michael Cole on the bike at the moment, and well and truly in the groove.
Hiscock has indeed held on to 2nd place. 3rd place is Rod Cox, Neil Chivas. 4th place, the 2 Honda team bikes, Andrew Johnson and Greg Pretty, now moving ahead of Glenn Taylor, Graham Muir on bike 6. So bike 7 has swapped places there in the Honda team. They're lying 4th and 5th. Len Willing a lap down on the Yamaha XJ750 bike number 1. And in the pits, let's hear from a man who's just been labouring away in some pretty hot sun at Oran Park, Neville Hiscock.
176 laps completed. Neville, how's the bike going?
Oh, very good, yeah.
No worries with the tyres?
No. You've always got to try and conserve your tyres and your bike in a long race like this, and that's what we're trying to do.
How's the heat going? Are you feeling it at all?
Oh, yeah, it's pretty hot.
And what's your strategy from here on in the race?
Go as fast as we can while conserving the tyres on the bike so that they last.
So Neil Chivas and Rod Cox, who had pitted at the same time as the Hiscock brothers bike, have now managed to be in front of them. They are dicing for 2nd and 3rd position on the track. They're on the same number of laps, both headed by the lead bike only, Rob Phyllis, Mick Cole on number 8. And here's the scrap for second and third, with it seeming to be resolved, with the yellow Katana Suzuki moving away slightly from David Hiscock, just settling into the groove on number 15.
25 seconds separates the leader, Michael Cole, from these machines. So Cole with, I guess you could call it a comfortable lead, but in a race that runs as long and as far as the Yamaha 750, 25 seconds is very insignificant indeed.
Particularly with a couple of pit stops still to come. One, and perhaps a second one. There's not a great deal in it. Interesting thing is that the Len Willing bike, which has now slipped slightly to the 6th place, is being backed up by the Gary Coleman Ron Bolden bike number 2 of the Toshiba Yamaha dealer team in 9th place, just in front of Jenny Coates, in fact.
Interesting also that right behind this scrap, 7 seconds behind in fact, is the Andrew Johnson Greg Pretty Honda, with Pretty really charging on that machine. He's one pit stop short of these people. He's had one pit stop less, so in fact his time on the road will stretch out again very shortly. But nonetheless, Pretty is really putting in an effort on that Honda, back in 4th place right now. Joining us again in the commentary position is Dennis Neal. Dennis, you've had a good look at the mechanical condition of these leading machines. Just where do they stand?
A little bit puffed out from running around down there. Mick Cole's bike on screen there. Robbie, in the hectic dice in the first hour or so, has hit the alternator cover about 3 or 4 times quite hard on the ground. And I would say one more bash on the ground, it would be through. It's very close. Have any team instructions been given? Yes, their team managers told them at all costs just to ride the bike really smoothly. Don't hit that cover on the ground. They can do around 25 to 26, what they're doing now per lap. They seem to be holding their advantage of about 20 seconds.
Well, in fact, they're not, because only about 5 laps ago, the advantage, or 10 laps ago, the advantage was 26 seconds. It's now down to 19.5. Right. So, in fact, Mick Cole is losing ground to the Hiscock brothers and to bike 4, the Rod Cox Neil Chivas Suzuki as well.
Yeah, I had a look at Neil's and Rodney's bike. Their cover's in about half the condition. It's only been hit about twice. It's still looking quite reasonable. The interesting fact is Dave Hiscock's bike and his brother Neville haven't hit their cover at all yet, so they're looking in the best condition as far as alternators go.
Meaning that if they wanted to have a real go this afternoon and really start cranking the bike over, they could afford to do so.
Right, but they seem to be experiencing a little bit of trouble with the suspension setting. They set it up a bit softer than the other 2 bikes in front of them, and it's slipping and sliding a little bit coming out of the turn, so they're sort of battling to do the times they're doing now.
What about the Hondas behind, lying in 4th and 5th place? The bike number 7, Andrew Johnson, Greg Pretty, now in front of bike 6, Glenn Taylor, Graham Muir. Will they be in the position to challenge later in the race?
They could possibly be. They reckon, talking to the riders, they said they've got a distinct power disadvantage. The Suzuki seem to be definitely quicker, but they're hoping or counting on the fact that if Mick makes a bit of a mistake there, hits that cover once more, and it's going to start seeping oil out, and they'll have to come in and change it, which will take about 5 minutes.
And what about Len Willing, back in 6th place, down a lap on that Yamaha?
Right, Lenny used the same tyre as last year, the soft compound tyre, and it was reasonably worn when they changed it there, so they lost the full minute changing the tyre, so I really don't think he's going to get back into it.
Even with the advantage of a new tyre now, it hasn't got the speed to catch the others.
Right, but the Yamahas, I think, have got it, or his bike has got a disadvantage of 1 extra fuel stop over the Suzuki, so there's another 20, 30 seconds there, so I'd say he'll probably finish about 4th.
There he is, bike 1, the Len Willing, Rod Brown bike. And about to be lapped again by bike 8, the leaders, Rob Phyllis and Michael Cole, which are putting 2 laps down on the leaders. So even while Michael Cole is taking it very easy at this stage, he's still significantly quicker than the Yamaha. In the pits for their 3rd scheduled stop, the leaders of the 600 class, the bike 40 of Ian Perrow and Glenn Williams, Perro, the winner of the class last year, now on the machine coming out, and they are an incredible 2 laps in front of Bernie Summers and John Wood on the Yamaha. And they seemingly have no problems at all on this new GPZ 550 Kawasaki, released only a couple of weeks ago in Australia, and certainly proving its mettle in the Yamaha 750 event today.
It's not only a 2-lap advantage on their class competitors, but lying 7th outright, and that's most creditable. Into the pits goes bike number 7, lying in 4th place. This, the best place of the Hondas, Andrew Johnson, Greg Pretty. Off it, Andrew Johnson, the Victorian, onto it. Johnson had a drop with that bike yesterday. A lot of cosmetic damage to it, and a lot of damage, I'd say, to his prestige.
23 seconds to stop, not bad at all. Hooked up his radio control gear again. That's a radio controlled Honda you see out there. They're running 2-way communication with their pits. The first time that's been tried in Australian motorcycle racing. It's been the norm in Australian car racing for the last 2 or 3 years, but it's the first time on the bikes, and it's working very, very well indeed for the team. They're able to communicate all sorts of problems, or even when they are wanting to come into the pits because they've gone to their reserve tank. And it's certainly solving a lot of problems for teams which have never been able to be solved before. The unusual, the incredible hand signals that have been thought up at a moment's notice, with riders trying to communicate to the pits that the bike is about to fall apart and trying to indicate what section of the bike's about to fall apart. Dennis Neal, you've experienced that sort of thing.
Funny thing is, as a rider going past, you get pretty upset at your pit crew that they can't work out what's wrong, but as you said, you make some sort of a gesture to them and it's almost impossible for them to know what's wrong.
So you think that this radio control could also be a damn good thing?
Yeah, excellent idea. It's really good.
You wouldn't be concerned about being called up in the middle of a corner when you've got 11 tenths on the clock and no chance of saving yourself except your own skill?
Yeah, I would be. What I'd like about it is they could play you a bit of AC/DC or something like that. If you got a bit bored, it might get you in the mood again. Because in these long distance races, you tend to get pretty bored, especially if you're not up in the first 3 or 4 bikes. After about the 4 or 5 hour mark, you start to get the feeling of...
Dennis, that's when the bike, the rear tyres getting worn, the track's getting slippery. It must be a danger time then to try and sustain your concentration.
That's right, and you become a bit blasé with the speed too. You've been out there doing it for hour after hour, and you tend to lose touch with the actual speed that you're doing, and one little lapse of concentration and down the road.
In fact, it was the latter part of last year's race where a lot of drama occurred and the whole race complexion changed, didn't it, within an hour of the finish?
That's right, about an hour from the finish. Rodney Cox, everyone thought had it shot to pieces, and his bike went out, and I think a couple of the other majors.
Alan Hales dropped his bike a bit earlier on, and it was when Willing and people came surging through and finally took the lead.
Right.
21 seconds in the lead is the Rob Phillips bike, but in second place this incredible dice between Dave Hiscock there on bike 15 and on bike 4 Rod Cox, both Suzukis. Or is it Neil Chivas? Neil Chivas, yeah. And what an incredible dice these two guys have been having for some time now, and they just don't seem to be letting up on it, Dennis.
No, they've changed places a few times now.
Dennis, that's the skittishness you were talking of in bike 15.
Right, he complained a couple of times when he came in his last 2 stints that he thinks he set the suspension a bit too soft and it's been making the tyre overwork, and it's quite a bit more worn than the leading bike.
And here's somebody who's revelling in his discomfort, isn't he, Neil Chivas?
Right. He'd be really rapt to see him sliding around. He'd just sit there and pressure him.
Right, but Greg Hansford was looking at the front end of that bike and saying it looked underdamped. It was doing a lot of dancing and tending not to keep the wheel on the ground.
Right, well, all these Suzukis, I'm amazed they don't have air forks like most of the unlimited class bikes now. But they're adjustable front ends. These only have the oil and spring rate, so you're limited the amount of travel you have by the amount of oil you put into it. And, they might have elected to use either a lower grade or a bit less oil than what Neil's used behind it.
This is the sort of thing, of course, a dice like this that does keep the rider's mind on the job, isn't it? And really sharpens him up.
It's the best thing that can happen. I'd much rather be dicing at this stage of the race than your mind wandering off and thinking about the beer you're going to have after the race or what you're going to do tomorrow. It's much more interesting than dicing.
does it therefore become automatic almost, that you come up to your braking points, your gear shift points, and you're just changing, doing everything
Just force a habit. You just get into rhythm, and it's amazing. You just seem to do it each lap after lap.
Are you still conscious of when the bike starts to move out a bit or get out of shape?
Yes, but you get a bit used to it, and this stage of the race, they might be sliding at 3 or 4 inches out of some of the tighter corners, and it doesn't really worry you. You just get absolutely used to it, and it becomes...
How progressive are modern tyres? And there's Chivas not only getting past Hiscock, leaving him on the outside on the exit of a corner, and making a nice advantage through the right-hander into the S's there. Yes, that's a nice blow. That's worth well over a second for sure.
Chivas using the traffic very well indeed, putting slower riders in between him and people he's been competing with all day. And a very, very heady ride from him.
This is the stage of the race that Neil, because of his fitness, he usually shines towards the end of his long-distance races. He doesn't sprint quite as hard in the start, but the last couple of hours is when he really shines.
Yes, how much warning do you get when the bike's starting to slide, and how progressive is it when it does slide?
With the 750s, it's really quite predictable, and especially after you've done a few hours. The tyres these days, the top 3 or 4 leading brands are all extremely good. They're incredible. Johnson and Rodney Brown.
The dice for 5th place now on the same lap as the leaders between bike 7, Andrew Johnson, and bike 1, Len Willing, who, using the superior power of that new rear tyre that he's placed on the bike, was not being lapped by the leader 2 laps ago to put him 2 laps behind, but is in fact back up onto the same laps as the leader. And Len Willing is flying because he's got that brand new tyre on the rear, and he's making very, very good use of a soft compound rear rubber at the moment. And you saw him just there fly through Andrew Johnson.
Was that a bit overconfident, Dennis Neil, the way he cut his shallow entry into that corner?
No, I think he would have sized that up from before and knew that he could do it. It's a tremendous confidence boost when you have got a brand new rear tyre.
The bike certainly didn't seem to move.
No, it looked spot on.
Interesting to work out at 198 laps, and they've now covered 200, that the average lap time has been 1 minute 25 seconds for the race, which is 2 seconds quicker than the average lap time of last year, and would lead us to a 10-minute shorter race, 6 hours 46 minutes. That's extending the situation as it is at the moment, including pit stops. The race situation with the 200 laps completed is that the race leader on the Suzuki number 8, Mick Cole and Rob Phillips, have a 14.5-second advantage over second place Rod Cox, Neil Chivas, third place Neville and David Hiscock, fourth place number 6 Glenn Taylor Graham Muir. The Hondas are moving about each other, and the Taylor Muir bike has come forward, number 6 to be in front of number 1 Len Willing Rodney Brown, and number 7 Andrew Johnson Greg Pretty. 2 laps down then to the leader of the 600cc class, number 40. He's been in front all day and is in front by more than 5 kilometres now. 2 laps, Ian Perrow very well backed up by Glenn Williams. And they head bike 41, Bernie Summers, John Wood. They're on a Yamaha. It's a Kawasaki leading the class. 42, Wayne Pratt, Graham Thompson, a Ducati, still percolating well. From 46, Chris Dixon and Ashkenazi on a Yamaha. And then 48, Barry Rochford, Warwick Blake on another Yamaha. Here's Neil Chivas doing a great job on bike number 4, pulling himself from a deficit of about 24 seconds on the race leader on number 8, Andrew Rob Phillips Mick Cole, pulling himself away from Neville and David Hiscock, who were pretty well square with him, in fact about a second in front, to be now only 8 seconds in arrears to the race leader, and to have thrown most of that into a nice comfortable gap behind him back to the Hiscock. So in other words, he's really got the bike operating and is running the fastest of the top 3 bikes. This one being the lead bike, and it's only some 8 seconds in front.
And indeed, with only 1 pit stop remaining, 8 seconds can be won and lost in the pit. So it's not just a case of on the track what he can do, it's also a case of the speed and accuracy of the pit crews in both cases.
indeed. The factor that does come into it is that on past experience, it might have been expected that Rod Cox would be the faster of the two riders on bike 4, but it hasn't proved today to be the case because Neil Chivas has been lapping fastest, but it's Cox that has to do the last session, and he's going to have to do it against the gun rider on bike number 8, Rob Phillis. And in 4th place, we've got 6 and 1. Len Willing is now passed on number 1. Len Willing and Rodney Brown on the Yamaha number 1 passed the Glenn Taylor Graham Muir Honda number 6. And there's another man out to make up ground, having a sprint now, particularly with the brand new rear tyre on the bike, so that we've got Suzuki's in the first 3 positions, Yamaha in 4th place, Honda's 5th and 6th, Kawasaki 7th, and leading the small bore class. Len Willing getting the best out of this shaft drive tourer. As with in the old days of the Armstrong 500, where Volkswagens were built fairly solidly and built for durability on the road and were therefore disadvantaged against cars like the Mini, it's also to some extent the case of this Yamaha XJ750, a very sophisticated road bike. This, of course, the Honda that's just been displaced by the Len Willing Yamaha, which is there in the foreground. But the shaft drive on the Yamaha, a delightful feature for road use that needs very little maintenance and no adjustment, doesn't work so well. There we see, I think it's 3rd placed Ducati in the 600 class, with the telltale sort of signs that we've been seeing, or we saw very much earlier in the day, from the 2 Matic Racing Team bikes. Shame, because this bike has been holding 3rd place in that class almost all day. It's a Ducati Australia entry. We've seen the Gowan Lock Engineering Ducati number 24 in various problems, the 750 class bike. It's had a fall and had numerous problems since then, but there's a very disappointed crew who, after more than 5 hours of riding and a very creditable 3rd place, you can imagine their disappointment when, through no fault of the rider, they've fallen out of their position, which they've earned so well. The race leader, as it has been for a long part of this race, is bike number 8, Rob Phillis, Mick Cole, on the Suzuki Katana 750. But their lead has been chiselled from 25 comfortable seconds to a mere 3 seconds by bike number 4, coming under the bridge there and well in vision of the bike that he's been hounding for the last 3/4 of an hour. And it's Neil Chivas doing a grand job on the bike that he's sharing with Rodney Cox. And right in behind bike 8, between the 2 of them, and in fact 2 laps down to them, is the second of the Toshiba Yamaha dealer team bikes, the Yamaha 750 of Ron Bolden, Gary Coleman. And even he's getting his pecker up, getting into this scrap. But the real interest is the way that Neil Chivas, with perhaps 6 or 8 or 9 laps to go to his final pit stop, has been working away at the race leader. If indeed they do take the race lead, either by overtaking the bike on the track or staying out longer, as 8 goes in for its final pit stop, it'll be the first time that bike 4 has hit the lead in this race. And Chivas sharing the bike with the man who last year looked to have the race sewn up, Rodney Cox, until the bike seized in the last hour of the race. And Dennis Neal, that a decision that could make the same sort of thing happen again has to be made by some of the teams today.
Right, I was talking to Mick Hone a little bit earlier, and they were hoping that they were going to build enough of a buffer zone in the lead to be able to stop to put a pint of oil in the bike in the last fuel stop. However, it's been whittled down to 3 seconds now. They've got a real race on their hands, so I think there'll be a lot of crossed fingers down there and hoping that the bike hasn't used too much oil.
And of course, Neil Chivas now with the bike firmly in sight almost every section of the track will be able to pull this final bit in very quickly.
Yeah, it makes an amazing difference once you get close enough get the scent of the rider in front, you override yourself a bit, and you can get right onto the tail, and I'd say another couple of laps and he'll be looking at trying to go around Mick.
The other interest is that the gap originally was about 25 seconds first to third, and it's now lengthened to about 38 seconds first to third with the Hiscock bike, number 15, 36 seconds in arrears to Chivas. So Chivas is not only pulling away from it, but the Hiscock bike is falling back to both first and second placed bikes. And it's 20 seconds back then to Len Willing, who's out chasing the Hiscocks. So it's quite an interesting latter part of this race with 5 hours 25 minutes ridden, 227 laps covered, 60 laps to go.
Interesting there that Ron Bolden has gone through Chivas and just looked down the straight at just how fast that Suzuki Katana goes against the Yamaha. That's where the power really stands. And there's bike 8 in the pits. Its last scheduled pit stop. Rob Phillips gets on the motorcycle. Michael Cole off it.
And now, of course, for the first time, we have a new race leader. Bike number 4 being ridden by Neil Chivas.
Oh, and a near crash there as bike 22, the Warwick Hall Peter Byers machine, came into the pits, and that could have taken out the race leader ever so easily.
And he himself is in 9th position. So Rob Phillips now, the number 1 rider.
No hint of any oil going into the machine, Dennis Neal. As you said, they just don't have time.
That's right, they don't have time, and Rob's will be under strict instructions now to go for it, keep the lead, but foremostly remember not to hit that cover on the ground, because as we said earlier, one more hit, it'll be through. It's very, very thin.
And what sort of time is he giving away by keeping the cover off the ground?
I would say half a second a lap, a second a lap to ride smoothly. But as we said before, the main disadvantage is when you come up to fast lap riders.
Here's the Yamaha that was in 4th place.
What do they want? They want him to take that, do they?
Len Willing in the pits. Rod Brown off the bike, Willing onto it. Slow pit stop from them. They're not rushing it at all by the looks of it. As a matter of fact, someone is working down around the bike, so I'd say that might be getting a bit of oil right there.
And that's Glenn Willing, another of the Willing family who's going racing later this year, who was up at the front of the bike with the rag picking up any petrol spill on the top of the tank.
Just made its last pit stop on the bike. Mick Cole's just got off. How's the bike going, Mick?
Oh, it's not too bad. It's showing the signs of wear. The tyres are a bit worn, and it chatters a bit under going into corners, and the brakes are worn down a bit. But that's why we can't prolong really fast times anymore because of those.
Well, how confident are you of keeping the bike together for the last 60 laps?
I think it'll stay together. Barring any mishaps.
We've heard reports during the day from you about your alternator covers. How are they going?
Well, we had to ride it to keep it off the ground, so that's why we had to ride a little bit slower, so that we didn't have to do an alternator change. I didn't hit it on the ground, so if Robbie conserves it, it'll last.
And what do you feel Robbie's strategy will be from here on in?
Oh, I think we're just going to maintain what we're doing and see if we can outlast everyone.
Good luck.
In the pits, Andrew Johnson off the bike. Greg Pretty about to get on. But they have a problem. They've been 30 seconds in the pits now, and there's a lot of work around the bottom end of the motor. Dennis Neal?
Yes, they're putting some oil on the Honda. They're a bit worried about the same problem. The Hondas seem to use a little bit more than the Suzukis, and that's what's taking the time there. They've got to snap the wire off the retaining cap, or about a pint in, and re-lock wire it back on to keep in line with the regulation.
Actually comfortable 6th position. It doesn't help them in terms of the 5 in front of them, but they have a 2-lap buffer to the next placed bike, which happens also to be the leader of the 600cc class, number 40, Ian Glenn Williams.
Well, they're certainly using all of that buffer because it's 1 minute 10 seconds so far, and with Andrew Johnson stepping over there, I wonder if it's not just a bit more than oil.
I think it's a bit more than oil. I've put it on the stand now, and Andrew's headed for the showers, I think.
That's it. She's all over for bike 7, the Greg Pretty Andrew Johnson bike, and what a great shame, because those two riders were really looking for a lot from them in the closing stages where the tiger of those two men would have really shown.
Well, bike 7, Greg Pretty, just pulled out of the race. Greg, what was the problem?
I'm not sure, actually. At the moment, I was down in the pits at the time. The stop's unscheduled, and it appears that there's some funny noises coming from the engine, so rather than risk anything, John's decided to pull the bike out.
Well, you're running 6th at the time. How had the bike been travelling up till now?
Well, no real problems with it. We're just sort of cruising around. The tyres weren't hanging on particularly brilliant, but I think everyone's in that same boat. You know, we're just waiting for later on in the event to we could strike back then.
Well, Greg, you're one of Australia's most experienced riders. Who do you see as the winner now?
Well, all things, if they go well, I can't see Robbie and Mick being beaten. They're both very experienced and know what long distance racing's all about, so I'd predict them to win it.
Greg Pretty, thank you very much.
Neil Chivas almost exhausted in the pits now as he comes in on the lead Suzuki, hands over to Rod Cox. Just look at Chivas, he can hardly stand up as Cox gets ready to go out. And a quick pit stop, only 18 seconds from the Suzuki, and now it's all go as Rod Cox charges back out onto the track, and we think still in the lead. No, he's been overtaken. So it's Rob Phillips in the lead. Cox is now in 2nd place, and this is where we're going to see it. There goes Phillips.
And the Hiscocks have just gone into the pits too. They're going down pit lane now on bike number 15. There they are. So this is the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 5th and 6th place bikes into the pits in very short time, and there's a quickie.
And Dennis Neal, as these people charge out, we note that there's only 53 laps remaining, which means that the Hiscock can certainly get through. But there seems to be some doubt, as Rob Phillips took his stop on 58 laps, whether he has the capacity to go the full distance.
Yes, the Hiscock and the Chivas bike will easily make it to the finish, but I've got my doubts about Rob Phillips and Mick Cole's bike. It's absolutely going to be cut down to the last lap.
What have they been doing in terms of laps on the track?
They've been getting 57 laps, getting an inboard on 57, so actually doing 58 laps. And they came in with, I think, 59 laps still remaining.
So if they have to crank it wide open, they're going to be using a bit more fuel than they have in the past on a tired bike.
And they've got to get 1 extra lap more than they've been getting out of their previous tanks. So,
and just to make it even harder on them, there's a strong headwind now coming straight up the track, which is going to slow them down even further, make them use a lot more gas.
Right, so I think it's really got a race on our hands here. It's going to be right double checkered flag.
Neville Hiscock now on bike 15. He's in 3rd place. 9.2 seconds separates Rob Phillips in the lead from bike 4, the Rod Cox Suzuki. Cox fresh and on the machine right now, and Neville Hiscock starts to fling his Suzuki around as he sets off in pursuit of the 2 bikes in front of him.
The 340 to 600cc class is running 3rd in that class at the moment. Is 4th in the class, bike 46, Chris Dixon and Steve Ashkenazi on a Yamaha 550. 6-speed gearbox on these twin cam bikes, and just that little bikini fairing around the headlight. Very nice light little sports stuff. Very peaky power though. The maximum torque is developed within 500 revs of maximum power. Maximum torque not coming in till 8,000 revs, maximum power at about 8.5. And Dennis Neal, they're a bike that any of these small bikes with not an excess of power, that you really have to keep wound up and keep your throttle on the stops as much as you possibly can.
Yes, the little Yamaha goes remarkably well for its size, and up till this point, until the introduction of the new GPZ 550 Kawasaki, has had a bit of a monopoly in the long distance racing of this class. It goes extremely well. And the boys both riding it there, Chris Dixon and Steve Ashkenazi, are 2 ex-top motocross riders in their day, so they don't venture into road racing very often. They're doing quite a good job there.
Ashkenazi did run in this race last year, actually broke a pelvis, I think, didn't he, in a fall at BP, in that mammoth fall, in fact.
Right, I think he was riding an LC Yamaha. He actually helps prepare the bikes which Stephen Gall runs in motocross for the Yamaha team during the year. Very competent tuner.
Well, he's a pretty competent rider too, doing a good job. Not able to catch that flying Kawasaki of the New Zealand pair, Perro and Williams. It's got a 2-lap lead on the class, but nothing wrong with 4th place. If you keep out of trouble and you run consistently, it's still, with more than an hour to run, still a possibility of perhaps somebody in the class making a slip even at this late stage.
Quite a number of mechanics, in fact, will also riding motorcycles here today. There's, of course, Ashkenazi, then Sedge Dest, who we've also seen in the small bike class today. Is perhaps one of the best known tuners on Sydney's North Shore. And of course, the bike that crashed out of contention a little while ago, Richard Scott from New Zealand, was out in Australia in 1981 working for the Maddich team as a spanner man in the Castrol 6 Hour of that year. .252 laps down, and the dice is on for third place as Neville Hiscock on the comparatively ill-handling Suzuki. Bike 15 struggles to hold out Len Willing on the Yamaha. Willing has been hauling him by up to a second and a half a lap, and now he's right on his tail. Dennis Neal, the Suzuki really seems to be off in the handling department.
Yeah, what I said earlier I think is definitely the case. They set the suspension up a bit too soft, and it's given abnormal tyre wear, and he's got by him there now. Neville's the sort of guy who'll really pull the pin. He won't like being passed at this stage of it.
What incredible riding from Len Willing there. Have you ever seen anything like it in a long distance race like this?
He's riding brilliantly lately, Lenny. He's really on the crest of the wave.
So only 27.2 seconds now separates first from third position, so it remains very much anybody's race.
Right, I think the only thing that might hold the Yamaha up is, according to my calculations, it's got one fuel stop to go, whereas the Suzukis have all had their last stop and they'll go through for the rest of the race. So
just look at the Suzuki down the straight now with the extra power that it has, trying to pick him up at balked by bike 30 Ron Carrick and the Jenny Coates Kawasaki.
And let's watch this passing manoeuvre again, where bike 47 absolutely stunned the Kawasaki of Alan Simpson as it's rounded up on either side by Hiscock thinking he's safe on the inside line, and Willing so confident and with such good grip saying, well, I'll take the long way round right onto the concrete. It doesn't worry me. And as he banks into the left-hander of the S's, he's got him and away. Tremendous riding.
There he is, Len Willing. Uses so much body English on that machine. His long, lanky legs just rubbing the ground.
He's had a lot of good experience on bikes, Len. He's done a lot of production bike racing. He's done a lot of TZ Yamaha racing and 350s, but also he's handled 750 Yamahas very well, hasn't he, Dennis?
Yes, and he handles motocross bikes very well, because he was an A-grade motocross, I believe, before he changed to road racing.
Very adept. Perhaps not as adept in the mechanical compartment as his older brother Warren, but as I was saying earlier, a younger brother, Glenn Willing, to come to racing this year. He's been working for the team for years and years now, preparation of motocross and road bikes. And now we look at the race leader, 8, there with an 8.8 second lead over second placed Rodney Cox on number 4, but he's got his own little problem with bike number 6. Looming in behind him as he has been for 20-odd minutes now, and being a dreadful pest to Phyllis, and that is just losing touch a little, Graham Muir on bike number 6. It's a lap down, it's lying in 5th place outright, has 1 lap on 6th place bike, and the 600cc class leader, Perro and Williams, bike number 40. But he's putting all the pressure he can on Phyllis on behalf of all the non-Suzukis in the race.
And with 260 laps gone, 27 laps remaining in the Yamaha 50, it's bike 8, the Rob Phillis, Michael Cole Suzuki, which leads by just 8.8 seconds from bike 4, Rod Cox, co-rider Neil Chivas, also on a Suzuki, and then a 44-second gap back to Lenny Willing on the first of the Yamaha XJ750s. At this time, 1 year ago, Willing had just moved into the lead, so his plan to move into the lead in the last hour of the race certainly has gone astray this year.
4th place behind them, bike 15, which is this one. Neville Hiscock currently riding, sharing the bike with younger brother David. Another of the Suzuki, so we've got Suzuki 1st, 2nd, 4th, with Yamaha 3rd and Honda 5th at the moment, and Kawasaki 6th and leading the small bore class. And Neville Hiscock has got problems with handling. You can see the bike moving around everywhere as it did through that apex. He's been pulled in, overtaken and moved away from by Len Willing, who's here. He's in third place, but he has a 41.6 second deficit. He's pulling the deficit down to bike number 4, Rodney Cox, presently riding. That's Suzuki. But by gee, it's a pretty massive task.
By more than a second a lap, Willie's pulling the time off Rod Cox, so this boy is really flying.
He needs to pull it in at well over a second and a half a lap to get there by race end, and he's got a potential problem, perhaps with having to do a top-up towards the end of the race to have enough fuel to run him through. It's going to be a close thing, let's put it that way. But he's doing a great job, one of the people chasing at this stage of the race. And just as he's chasing number 4, Rod Cox, Neil Chivas, on the last stint on that bike, did a tremendous amount of chasing, slotted it in for the first time in the race as he got by the second rider on bike number 8, Mick Cole. Now the situation has changed. We've got Rod Cox on 4 and Rob Phyllis on 8, and Phyllis has been able to maintain station pretty well, so that his gap when they both out and settled in was 10.3 seconds, and it's still 8.8. So he's replied to a little bit of ground made by Cox and been able to keep that handy buffer of nearly 9 seconds. And Cox, of course, would just love to haul it in. He's got 26 laps to play with it, so he's only looking for fractions of a second a lap. And that's the man he wants. And there is Graham Muir, both of them from Albury. Rob Phyllis and the Loose Goose, as Muir is called. And he's been that close to Phyllis for pretty well half an hour, and that might be the pressure and the assistance that Rod Cox just might need, because all the time Phyllis is having to cover himself, and of course he just could perhaps be forced into error, although he's made precious few errors in 6¼ hours of riding, perhaps the major ones being that 2 or 3 times in the first session when he was thrusting for the lead and fighting with the Hiscock brothers, he touched the alternator cover on the ground and has worn it perilously thin. The essence. Is 1 lap down and holding 5th place on bike number 6. There are in fact 29 bikes still running from a capacity starting field, track limit of 50, which faced starters instructions at 9 o'clock this morning on this 287 lap, 751 kilometre journey, a most arduous one, but a most rewarding one for those that succeed, because there's some $20,000 worth of prize money up for grabs, plus various incentives and trophies. .24 laps to go, still the gap from 8 to second place number 4, 8.8 seconds, but Willing chiselling away at the 40-odd second lead that Cox holds over him. A day of disaster for Ducatis. All the Pantars very highly favoured, especially the South African Peterson bike from the Matic Racing, have expired. The Go and Lock Engineering 750 Ducati has suffered falls and general maladies, mostly resulting from that fall. Kawasaki 750s suffered a fair few problems too. 3 or 4 of them running out with engine problems, seemingly related to the type of oil they were using, because they were all on the same oil, all suffered big end bearing failure. Very smart rear styling on that Yamaha around the tail light, anti-dive front suspension, all sorts of fancy electronic wizardry on the instrument panel, check lights and warning systems and so on, making it a very appealing road bike. Quite an expensive bike, depending on how well you can bargain with your dealer, and There's the sort of thing that just can happen late in the race, and it's Len Willing. No, it's not. It is the race leader. It is the race leader, Rob Phillis. And Graham Muir needs to be thanked by Rodney Cox on 4, by Len Willing, Rodney Brown on 1. He can't believe it.
What sort of damage, Dennis Neal?
It's fallen down the left-hand side.
Here we go, let's have a look. Just as simple as
right
that.
over the top, high-sided.
Under brakes.
Yep, it's dug in. I'd say, as we said, the cover was that thin, it's probably smashed the cover and the oil will be dripping out on the left-hand side now.
You can see a heartbroken man reaching for that bike, Dennis, just in the way he leant down for it, can't you? Yeah. Shattered dreams.
Terrible. After all the effort and time and put in for this to happen at this stage of the race here.
That's the way they've ridden, the number of laps they've led this race. They don't deserve that sort of end. Very heavy toss for bike number 8. And there's the man that caused it, that kept the pressure on, Graham Muir, quite fairly and legally. He was a lap down, but he hounded and he pursued, and Rob Phillis finally fell for the bait. So, race leader is the man who was leading the race at this time, or a little bit further from the end, a year ago, or last August, and that's Rodney Cox on bike number 4, and then his engine seized, and guess who came through? This is the bike we're talking of, and guess who came through to the win? It was Len Willing and Rodney Brown, and they're in second place at the moment, and they are chasing Rodney Cox. 35 seconds in arrears. They've made some 7 seconds. It's going to be a race to the flag, 23 laps to go.
Rob Phillis's fall keeps one record intact, however, Dennis Neal. You were saying earlier that not in a long time in these long distance races has the man who captured pole position in practice ever won the race. Rob Phillis looked like breaking that jinx this year.
Yeah, I hope I didn't put the hex on him when I said that, but it is a fact. No one who seems to get pole position seems to win any of these long distance races.
That is a great shame, because nobody would wish it to a very likeable and talented young rider, Robbie Phillis, his co-rider Mick Cole. They did everything right, Dennis, didn't they? And perhaps all that made the difference was just that combination of weariness and the racer's edge that keeps a man competing right to the very end that finally brought him undone.
You just see how easy it is. One little tiny lapse of concentration, a little bit too much pressure on the front brake. He's locked it up and it's just gone in for in. That'd be bitterly disappointing. It's not just the rider who loses out, it's the whole team. It's a whole team effort to win one of these long distance races.
Second place man, bike 1, down the straight, slipstreaming any motorcycle he can get near to get just that bit more advantage down, because at this stage Len Willing is flying.
And Dennis, just as the hopes have fallen in Team 8, what sort of a spur is this going to give Len Willing to chase that 35-second gap that now in the one lap has come back to 33?
The way Lenny's riding, I don't think he needs a spur. He's doing a tremendous job there, but that will really sharpen his reflexes. Now he knows that he's got a really good chance of taking us out again, and he is a little bit the underdog, so we'll really fire him up. He'll be trying everything he can do now.
What an incredible race to the finish after 6 hours and 20 minutes of riding. The leader to go down and to have only an 8.8 second margin, and now to have this race on to the flag between first and second. 3 riders on the same number of laps completed, 266, the third of them being David and Neville Hiscock on 15. They're certainly not in a position to chase Willing, who's overtaken them and moved away. It's a lap down then to Graham Muir, so that just as he's benefited Rodney Cox, helped him up into first place perhaps, he's moved himself forward a place, of course. He's down a lap, but he's in 4th place, best placed Honda, and then it's 3 laps down to the 3 bikes on the 266 laps to bike number 22, Warwick Hall, Pete Byers, a New Zealander and a Queenslander sharing a Honda, and then to 6th place and leader of the 600 class, still Ian Perrow, Glenn Williams, outstanding on their Kawasaki 550.
20 laps remaining. The split now 29 seconds, and then back in 3rd position is bike 15, the Hiscock brothers. Until 2 days ago, sponsored only by themselves. Now they have the sponsorship of Jeb's helmets, which you can see they're both wearing. At least you can see Neville's wearing it at the moment. And there you can see Bike 40, which is the class leader in the 600cc class by still that incredible 2-lap margin. Ian Perrow and Glenn Williams. Perrow having won the class last year. That's Glenn Williams on the motorcycle at the moment. The GPZ 550 Kawasaki.
Interesting to look through last year's results, where Len Willing, Rodney Brown were first on Yamaha, Ron Bolden, Gary Coleman second, Rob Phillis third on a Honda 750. Warwick Hall, who's moved into 5th place now, was 5th last year. Perrow, first last year with his brother Mike Perrow.
And in fact, Bike 40 is, if anything else, catching the Hiscock brothers on the 750cc machine.
Then he does have to stop to pop up.
Williams using this little motorcycle to good advantage down the straight. Of course, you'd expect the Suzuki to open out an advantage with 250 or 200 cc's extra. But in the handling department, the comparatively ill-handling Suzuki against the Unitrack suspension Kawasaki is really losing out.
There are 19 laps to go. The gap first to second is 27.5 seconds now, down from 40 odd, but they will need a top-up to get them to the end. And they do need that. Great gumption by any motor car or motorcycle manufacturer to sponsor a race and to stand your product in your own race against everybody else. And last year Yamaha were underdogs but took out both classes finally. This year they're underdogs, and an hour ago even you'd have said they had no chance, and yet now they've got a slim one. And their team are fighting for them all the way. Certainly not going to win the 340 to 600cc class. That looks a lay-down misère for the Bike 40, a quite incredible margin that it's got over fairly similar machinery. Yamaha, in its own named race, sponsoring 2 bikes, the Tsushima Yamaha dealer team. The first of them is the Len Willing Rodney Brown bike chasing the leader. The second of them is lying at the moment in 7th place. It's frankly had a fairly undistinguished weekend. Didn't practice particularly quickly. They were bumped. They were sort of in the top 10, and then everybody started rushing around, and finally ended up on 24th grid position, Ron Bolden and Gary Coleman. And been well out of the top 10 for most of the day. Have threaded their way into it at this stage. Now lying in 7th place, but they're 4 laps down.
There he is, Bike 2.
That's Gary Coleman. You always tell the sunglasses, a new set of leathers there for Gary. The man who had started the final round of the Unlimited Road Race Championship on the Yamaha Grand Prix race bike, some of the fastest race bikes ever made, at Sandown last December. And an unbelievable set of circumstances in practices saw Graham Muir come down and break a collarbone on spilt oil, and on the same lot of oil Gary Coleman come down and take an enormous amount of skin off. His bike was repairable, so it looked as though he might win the championship in the absence of Muir, but finally Muir did a deal with Kim Colby, borrowed the bike, offered to pay him all the prize money, started off behind Coleman, but caught him, and Coleman said, my heart wasn't in it, everything was aching, I didn't like the bike sliding, I was worried about falling off, and his chance at the Unlimited title just slipped away, and he was a very disappointed man that day. But looking forward to a good year this year, a lot of production bike plans for the team, and also the latest and greatest in 500cc Grand Prix bikes.
Although Gary Coleman has already taken some skin off this year in the pits last night while mucking about on the team's tricycle, which they use for carrying spare parts up to the pit lane. He fell off at about 30 kilometres an hour and his leg was all bloody, and he was very, very embarrassed about that. And I'm sure now that everyone on ABC television knows about it, he'll be even more embarrassed.
He probably wishes you'd stop smiling. Two guys that really do enjoy their racing. Below the humour and the chatter and the banter that goes on in that team between two guys that get on very well together. Moyna Bolden, Ron's mother, Warren Willing, the arch professional in terms of preparing bikes and assorting bikes and planning race strategy. All the people that work on the bikes, they really turn them out well, they run them hard, and I'm surprised that in fact that particular one hasn't run harder over this weekend.
24.5 seconds the gap now between Rod Cox in the lead and bike one, Len Willing. Willing still pulling the gap down, but we're told he must take that pit stop. That of course puts paid to his chances.
$6,000 is first prize money, which might seem a lot for the hard work that goes in terms of the riders, the risks that they take. But when you consider that it's well over the value of the piece of machinery they're riding, and if you equate that to a Hardy Perodo or a James Hardy prize, well, you'd be looking at perhaps something over $100,000 first prize, which of course is far more than the actual prize money in the Hardy.
Nonetheless, the prestige that lies with winning a race like this is quite immense. On the showroom floor, it will really show dividends this year. The winner of the Yamaha 750 race can expect to pick up quite a deal of sales advantage.
23.6 the gap, 15 to go.
The 750cc class, of course, the coming class in Australian motorcycle road-going situations. The big dinosaurs, the 1100s, have still got a long way to go, but this is the class that a lot of the manufacturers are putting a lot of impetus into. They believe a lot of people want to come up, road riders want to come up onto machines like this, the high technology 750s, which are really starting to put so much effort into the development of engine, suspension, that sort of thing, where outright horsepower isn't so paramount as indeed is the technology they put into the bike.
In fact, Honda have got a very exciting new bike in the 750 class. We're ready for release within about a month. A V4, water-cooled, with tremendous sophistication. There is the sadness and the disappointment of bike number 8. Mick Cole can't believe it, Rob Phillips can't believe it, the team's shattered, and they don't deserve to be shattered.
There's the alternator cover. Dennis, do you think there's any possibility that that could have split beforehand and the oil brought them down?
No, I don't think so, because you don't scrape it in that part of the track. It wasn't ground anywhere near that badly last time I looked at it.
The exhausted Rob Phillips standing right there. That's not just the effort of pushing the bike back, that's the sheer frustration of this entire day going for absolutely nothing right now.
A lot of emotions going through that man's mind. And that man, his co-rider, that did so well, hauled the bike back into the lead at one stage.
Part of the damage, you can see the silks that Rob Phillips is wearing there torn through. Would have hurt a little bit. Probably wouldn't even notice it yet.
Yes, to go back to some of the other bikes that are coming out in the 750 class, Honda's V4 is a most interesting bike on which they are basing some endurance races. It's got a 5-speed gearbox with an overdrive, and I don't quite know how that works. Dennis, do you know anything about it?
No, you've got me there, Will. I don't know much about that one at all myself.
But it's a shaft drive, very sophisticated suspension, and that'll be out shortly. And then in the 550 class, we're now seeing some interesting bikes. Honda with a very neat-looking little CBX4, Yamaha with their V-twin water-cooled. That's a very appealing bike. The GPZ 550 Kawasaki, a lot of really good mid-range bikes coming to the fore. This, the man they're chasing, the man that Len Willing's chasing, Rodney Cox. They haven't led very many laps of the race at all. If they run through to the finish in the lead, they won't have led anywhere near the number of laps that Rob Phillips did, or that probably Neville and David Hiscock led. 22.4 the gap, 13 laps to go, so they're starting to set the odds now against game Len Willing. Graham Muir. He's unlapped himself, so he's on the same number of laps as the three in front of him. The man immediately in front, Neville Hiscock on 15, the man in front of him on bike 1, then Willing.
Graham Muir left with no ride after today. He's totally unsponsored. His TZ750 Yamaha, on which he won the Australian Unlimited Championship last year, of course, can't race this year because there's no class for it, at least no championship class. So Graham Muir, when he steps off the motorcycle this afternoon, steps into oblivion as far as he's concerned, which is a great disappointment.
In terms of bike brands, we therefore have Suzuki lying first, third, Yamaha second, Honda fourth, fifth, Kawasaki sixth. And running second in the small class, Bernie Summers, John Wood, another of the Yamahas, so they look as though they'll run into second place in that class, but they certainly, unless bike 40 blows up or crashes, will not win it. But riding enthusiastically, Bernie Summers.
That's Wood on the bike.
Yes, John Wood.
Who was second in the 1981 Australian 350cc Championship, a New Zealander, excellent rider. Summers, his co-rider, to leave tomorrow for America to compete in the Daytona race. He's competed for the last 2 years. He finished 48th in 1980, finished 19th in 1981, both in the 250cc classes. So this year, for $1,000, he's rented a 750cc machine and he's going for broke in the big one. An enthusiast par excellence. He takes most of his little hot bits across in his cabin luggage. And enjoys his motorcycle racing no end. He's found himself a job as an advertising manager for one of the motorcycle publications so that he can enjoy his sport on a full-time basis.
Coming up to lap, in fact, Mick Damon and Rob Scollier, two Tasmanians, sharing Suzuki number 5, which was prominent very early in the race. It took one of the falls in the first couple of hours of the race. It spelt the end of the chances of that bike, but it was very much a front runner.
This bike 41, in fact, is to be given away later this year in a competition being run by Rev's Motorcycle News. They say that they'll give it a new paint job and they might even go inside the engine and do it up before they give it to the winner. Here he comes into the pits, John Wood. Second place in the 600cc class. This will be his last pit stop. This team using dry ice to compress the fuel and get just a little bit more fuel into the tank. But at the first pit stop this morning, the dry ice just about froze the fuel to the degree that nothing had go into the tank at all, and Wood had to leap on top of the fuel tank and actually start to belt it to get the fuel to flow. Bernie Summers now onto the machine and John Wood off. That first pit stop took them in excess of 60 seconds. I think it detuned the team and has for the rest of the day.
10 laps to go, 20.1 seconds the gap first to second, so it's just a tenth over 2 seconds a lap, and that task is now starting to look impossible. 18.5 seconds back from bike 1, Len Willing, to third placed Neville Hiscock, bike 15, and then behind him is Graham Muir on bike 6. Bike 1 sandwiched in second place, 20 seconds in arrears to race leader, 18.5 seconds in front of third place, and at the moment unable to do anything about that 20 seconds. Finding there a bit of traffic just to cost him valuable tenths. Now, no doubt, tremendously tired, starting to worry about that final pit stop and starting to feel that the insurance of a finish and a place is better than some daring do that might bring him undone in the run to the flag. They've been racing for 6 hours and 37 minutes. They've covered 278 laps. They have 9 to go. And it's been a hard testing day for everybody. Other than the the crashes and problems in the first couple of hours, Dennis. It's been a pretty settled race, hasn't it, really, in terms of incidents?
In the middle stages there, it got extremely settled, but like all these long-distance races, the last hour is when it all pops up again. And as we just saw with Robbie Phillis's unfortunate crash, sort of can change the picture of the whole race quite dramatically.
In fact, Willing has lost ground now to take out 20.9 seconds, the gap from him to first. Saw those knees on display in a second-hand shop, I don't think you'd want them for all the work they do and the bumping and bashing that they get. They really must be a knobbly old set of knees that start off as a fairly lanky lot anyway. But here's the race leader. This has been a great effort, Dennis Neal. They so quietly went about the job, they never once got involved in scraps early on in the race. Then suddenly there they were, coming towards their second last pit stop. They got to the front and they've been there ever since. It is a beautifully planned race.
Neil Chivas is extremely good with his father Doug, who had a lot of experience in racing cars. He manages their pit and they really look into these races and plan them right down to a T, and this is probably pretty much the way that they planned the race was going to go.
Another Doug's been involved in the effort too, young Doug, who races sidecars, and he's been there today. He raced Morris Cooper's actually with his father at Bathurst back in the 1960s.
Indeed, he won his class in 1964 on a Mini Cooper with Doug Sr.
Very young boy at that stage.
He was indeed, but the two of them did it very well indeed against some heated opposition, and it shows the depth of experience that backs up the Chivas team when they go racing motorcycles today. Even Rod Cox, who we see here, who's 27 years of age, lives at Campbelltown, has been around for a long time now, a number of years, and has put up some excellent results. Most recently, he won his class, the 750cc class, in the New Zealand Castrol 6-hour motorcycle race last year. The eyes of Rob Phillis. Getting ready to go out again. He'll be a long way down in the field, but I think it's a matter of honour that he wants to finish.
Well, he's got the laps up to be classified as a finisher. You have to complete a certain proportion of the race distance, and he certainly met that requirement, so that it's well worth their time in terms of prestige and in terms of prize money. To be classified as a finisher, they must complete 75% of the race, 215 1/4 laps. And of course, they've well and truly done that. We come back to the leader. Gunning it in second gear out of the slowest corner on the circuit, snapping it to third, holds it over the bridge, commits himself absolutely blind to the right-hander. Dennis Neal, if you don't get things right there, you're in a lot of trouble at high speed.
That's one of the hardest corners on the whole circuit. Well, as you said, it is blind coming up over the bridge, and you've got to set yourself up a long way before that one. If you slip out at 4 or 5 feet too wide to the left, there's a lot of powdery gravel there and a lot of undulations in the track. So,
from a rider's point of view, let's go round the circuit now with bike number 4, the leader, Rod Cox, and how you remember racing at this circuit in which you've done so many miles on superbikes and on production bikes. In fact, I think you're still the superbike lap record holder.
Yes, myself and Robbie Phillis have both got the superbike lap record at 16.9. The track's deteriorated quite a bit over the last year, and a lot of the riders complain, although the bikes and the tyres are getting better, they aren't significantly enough to improve the lap times.
The kink at the end of the straight then, back a gear?
Right, back to 4th gear for that, back to 3rd, back to 2nd in this one. Quite a slow left-hander. 3rd into 4th down along here under the bridge.
But this is deceptive. You can easily run up to that corner too quickly, can't you?
Right, you're doing well over 100 miles an hour down there, believe it or not, down that short straight. Back to 2nd gear for this tight right-hander.
And this is quite a slow corner.
One of the slowest corners on the circuit.
What about this sit down here in the apex?
Up into 3rd, and there's a bit of a bump just there, so you've got to be pretty smooth on changing the direction of your body weight. 3rd gear up onto the bridge. As we said, this is the part where you've got to set yourself up a long way before, blind right-hander.
And kicking it off in 2nd gear there, the bike accelerates like a shot there. Right. Wheel spin problems?
Well, on the super bikes especially. The 750s are quite tractable and don't get that problem, but super bikes actually go back to first for that corner with their close ratio gearbox, and they're can often get the front wheel elevated quite high in the air out of there.
And that corner is a deceptive one too, Yamaha corner.
Right.
Quite a quick one.
Yes, it's a third gear corner. It's quite rough going into it, and there's quite a break up in the surface coming out. There's patches where they've resurfaced it, and that was the corner actually where Steve Trinder had his last spring in the Swan Series, and claims a lot of the top riders. Down the straight, they get these 750s into top gear, only for a short time, then back to fourth, go through the kink at the end.
What sort of speed would they do down the straight?
750s would probably be getting about 115, 120 miles an hour.
And what sort of speed over a standing quarter, standing 400 metres?
About 13.5 seconds, I think they're doing these.
So in other words, quicker than the quickest of road-going motor cars.
That's right. The acceleration on these things is really very, very few cars that will ever leave the opposite set of lights. The brakes, they've also got the brakes to match, and the handling. Now, as you said, they're improving the bikes all the time, this middle class of bike. And in fact, in Japan and some other European countries, that they have a 750cc limit on the bike, so that's as large as they're allowed to sell.
5 laps to go now, 282 completed. The gap first to second between Cox on 4, Willing on 1, Suzuki to Yamaha, 19.1 seconds. It's a 21-second gap back then to Suzuki in third place, number 15. Not far behind that to Honda number 6, Graham Muir. Fifth place is number 22, Warwick Hall, Pete Byers, originally to be Brian Hall with Warwick, 2 New Zealanders, but Pete Byers, the Queenslander, who so distinguished himself a couple of years ago in the Castrol 6 Hour, I think one, Dennis, for which you took pole position, but Peter Byers, coming down to Amaroo for only, I think, about the second visit, was about 6th fastest qualifier.
Yeah, Pete's a real goer up in Queensland. He doesn't get around to too many of the other interstate tracks in Australia, but he's certainly got all the heart and ability.
Interestingly, Warwick Hall finished 5th last year as well, so if he holds his position, it's 5th 2 years in a row. Fourth position, bike 6. The Honda of Albury rider, Graham Muir. The young Sydney rider, Glenn Taylor, the co-rider on this machine, in fact the lead rider on this machine in the pits. He's been riding for Team Honda ever since Dennis Neal's big crash at Bathurst last year. Took over the seat, Dennis, and is doing a pretty good job for a young fella.
Yes, the Honda camp's very pleased with the way Glenn's going. I think when he gets a little bit more experience of getting through the traffic, he's going to be one of the riders in Australia racing of the future for sure.
It's said that one of his big problems is his ability to thread his way through traffic, but it does appear that certainly he's learning his way.
Races like this are a tremendous experience. 7 hours out there and you're dicing with lap traffic the whole way, and this is really where you learn a lot. Learn here what you'd learn in a year of doing your shorter races.
Three laps remaining now. Less than 10 kilometres of the Oran Park circuit. .4 seconds the gap from the leader, Rod Cox, back to Len Willing on bike 1. Then from Len Willing, there's 21 seconds back to bike 15. You see they're leading that class. That's the Dave Hiscock, Neville Hiscock, New Zealand Suzuki team.
That's very skittish motorbike, very difficult to ride at this stage. Dennis Neal, it's doing most things wrong.
Looks like the rear end especially is jumping around a hell of a lot. I'd say his tyres either throwing a weight off and gone out of balance, or one of his shock absorbers is overheated, lost his damping, but it's dancing around quite considerably.
Just on 40 seconds behind the leader, and I guess he deserves some sort of reward for the incredible job that they've done holding this bike on the track, because it certainly would have to win some sort of prize as the worst handling machine on the circuit today, as distinct from the two Suzukis in front, or rather the Suzuki in the lead, which is doing so much better. Just goes to show that even though these bikes are production bikes, the amount of work, the fine-tuning that you put into turning a road-going production bike into a compromised racer, which is something else again.
See there that Lenny Willing is shaking the tank trying to get the petrol to surge around. He's only got a couple of laps to go and he's trying to make it, but I think he's probably going to have to come in next lap and just get a few pints just to get him to do the last lap.
Well, he's fighting now for second place because, as we said, 21 seconds behind him is the Hiscock Brothers Suzuki from New Zealand. Now, if Len Willing pits, he's going to lose second place and pick up only third position. So he's got to make that fuel last out.
Graham Muir's looming in there too on the same number of laps on bike 6 in 4th. So this is quite critical.
It'll be a $1,000 pit stop if he makes it, because the difference between second place and third place is $2,500 to $1,500. So for the sake of a litre of petrol, he looks like losing $1,000.
It all cost them in that first stop where they only got an hour out of it. They got an hour 25 in the next one. And there is just 2 laps to go. The blue flag is in readiness on the start-finish line for the race leader. The blue flag says you've got 1 to go, so he's got this one to complete, plus 1. And there it goes to the race leader, Rodney Cox. His co-riders, Neil Chivas, they've got 12 corners to negotiate, 4 strong braking points, hard braking points. This one, hard on the anchors. And this is 1 lap where they're not going to be adventurous. This is a fine ride, beautifully calculated, well prepared, well run in the pits. Calmly, coolly executed. And it's Rod Cox, a great ambassador for motorcycling, a very well-presented young man, who's worked his way up steadily from 250 class racing to 750 and 1100cc bikes, and has steadily improved over the past 3 or 4 years, backed up by Neil Chivas, another very amiable and decent sort of a bloke. And it will be, I'm sure, a popular win. At the same time, a lot of sympathy must go to Mick Cole and to Rob Phillis, because they really had earned the win, and the carelessness of a moment really didn't seem to deserve that sort of penalty. The Coca-Cola dogleg, 1 corner, 1 braking application to go, VP bend. Now jubilation, the knowledge you can't be beaten. The checkered flag awaits, and it's Rodney Cox winning the second Yamaha 750 race for Suzuki across the start-finish line, 18 seconds ahead of the challenging Yamaha XJ 750 of last year's winner, Len Willing and Rodney Brown, bike number 1. They take the flag now. Third place should go to the New Zealand pairing, the brothers Neville and David Hiscock, bike 15, Suzuki Katana. And as the field comes through, they still have not finished. They finish now in 3rd place. 4th place should go to Honda number 6, Graham Muir and Glenn Taylor. 3 laps down then. Those bikes all completed the full race distance of 287 laps, but it's a 3-lap gap back then to Warwick Hall from New Zealand, Pete Byers from Queensland on another Honda number 22, and to the winner in the 600cc class and 6th outright, number 40, Ian Perrow from New Zealand, and Glenn Williams also from Kiwiland.
There are the results of the second Yamaha 750 production motorcycle race at Oran Park, and what a great race it's been. Certainly full of intense excitement at the outset, as people attempted so hard to establish advantages and brought themselves undone in the process, and then right at the end to see the lead taken away from the Suzuki of Michael Cole and Rob Phillis, and given to this man, bike 4, Rod Cox and Neil Chivas.
About 5 minutes faster than last year's race time. So under 7 hours for 750 kilometres. You can see it's about a 107 kilometre an hour average, including pit stops, on what's turned out to be quite a warm and trying day at Oran Park. Neil Chivas. You can imagine how thrilled he is.
Chivas not in the team leathers. He picked up his leathers only on Friday and found that they were a bit too tight over his shoulders, so he elected to run his old leathers for comfort, because comfort was all important in this race. You just couldn't go out there unless you felt fit in yourself and good in yourself. You certainly wouldn't take the risk of developing a cramp in an arm or a leg or something of that nature.
Great credit to the entrant, JCW Motorcycles and Chivas and Cox Racing. There's Rodney Cox. And boy, he earned that. He fought to the end, withstood the willing challenge, let him haul in a bit and then said that's enough, and kept him out at 18 seconds. And a tremendous sense of achievement, I imagine, Dennis Neal, after such a long time, so much application, so much planning, pre-race testing, to see it come off.
I'd be absolutely thrilled now, and fantastic. His wife there just gave him a kiss. She'd be thrilled to pieces too, because Rod and Neil both do it the hard way. They don't get a lot of money. They've got some assistance from Suzuki and JCW this year, but in the past years they're not like some of the more better sponsored teams that are racing.
In fact, factory-sponsored bikes, it was quite odd. In practice, qualified 8th, 9th, 21st, 24th and 25th, and they were factory Yamaha, Honda and Ducati entries, and it's quite unusual to see factory bikes so far down the field. David Clark from Yamaha, the sponsors of the race, making the presentation now to the satisfied and the disappointed people in the pit area in what has been a most interesting and a hard-fought race, and to some deserving winners. And I would hope that they'll be back again next year for this classic race, the longest and richest in Australian production motorcycle racing.
In the meantime, we'll look forward to bringing you a lot more motorcycle racing from around Australia this year, and indeed motor racing on ABC Sport. And today, on behalf of our commentators, David Morrow, Will Hagan, Dennis Neal and Greg Hansford, we bid you farewell from Oran Park and hope you've enjoyed this afternoon's motorcycle racing, the Yamaha 750 from Oran Park.